Tonight, we are walking beneath a sky so clear that every star seems to rest upon the dark waters of the Aegean Sea. A cool wind carries the scent of salt, wild thyme, and olive trees across quiet hills where marble temples sleep beneath silver moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once before silence settles over the countryside again. It is in this peaceful darkness that an old mystery begins to awaken. Of all the heroes who crossed the pages of Greek mythology, why did Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and thoughtful judgment, place her trust not in the strongest warrior, nor in the noblest king, but in a restless man whose greatest weapon was his endlessly questioning mind? Before we begin, if you enjoy these peaceful journeys through ancient mythology, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your location and the local time where you are listening tonight. Now, allow yourself to breathe slowly as the ancient world quietly opens before you. You find yourself standing upon a narrow path climbing the rocky slopes above the island kingdom of Ithaca. Below, moonlight scatters across gentle waves until sea and sky become almost impossible to separate. Small fishing boats sway softly within the sheltered harbour. Oil lamps flicker behind stone walls where families have long since fallen asleep. Farther inland, groves of twisted olive trees whisper as cool sea winds move through their silver leaves. Nothing appears extraordinary. Ithaca is not the richest kingdom in Greece. It possesses no enormous temples like those of Athens, no broad, fertile plains like Argos, no towering walls to rival mighty Mycenae. Its beauty lies in its quiet endurance. Steep hills, hidden coves, stubborn farmers, patient sailors, and narrow valleys shape the people who call this island home. The ancient Greeks often believed that landscapes quietly shaped character. Mountains demanded resilience. The sea rewarded patience but punished arrogance. Olive trees grew slowly, requiring decades before reaching maturity, reminding every generation that wisdom could never be hurried. Perhaps this was why Athena watched places like Ithaca with unusual affection. Her sacred tree was already rooted here, its branches stretching patiently toward generations not yet born. Some later storytellers suggested that Athena's attention toward Odysseus began long before anyone noticed it. Historians continue to debate whether this tradition belonged to the oldest oral poems, or appeared centuries later as worshippers sought deeper meaning within the famous partnership between goddess and king. No surviving temple inscription can answer with certainty, yet the idea remained remarkably persistent. Somewhere within these quiet hills, the goddess may already have been observing. The night feels unusually still. Even the insects pause their endless chorus. Then, from the branches of an ancient olive tree, an owl glides silently across the path before disappearing into darkness without making a single sound. To an ordinary traveller, it might seem like nothing more than another creature hunting beneath the moon. But to those who lived in ancient Greece, the owl belonged to Athena herself. It represented clear sight in darkness, the ability to notice what others overlooked. A single appearance could be understood as a gentle divine acknowledgement rather than a command. You continue walking until the palace of Ithaca rises above the hillside. Unlike the shining marble buildings imagined in later centuries, this palace is built from sturdy stone and timber, practical rather than magnificent. Torches burn low beside its entrance. Bronze shields catch faint reflections from the fire, somewhere inside. Servants quietly prepare tomorrow's bread while guards lean upon long spears, speaking softly so as not to disturb the sleeping household. Within those walls rests a child who has no idea that poets will one day remember his name for thousands of years. He is neither the strongest among Greek princes nor the most handsome. His kingdom is modest, his future uncertain. Nothing about him announces greatness, yet destiny often approaches with quieter footsteps than glory. The Greeks rarely imagined fate as something loud or sudden. Instead, destiny unfolded gradually, almost invisibly, like the slow opening of a pure flower beneath spring sunlight. Every conversation, every decision, every unexpected encounter became another thread woven by unseen hands. The three Moirae, whom later generations called the Fates, measured each human life with calm certainty. Even Zeus himself respected the boundaries they established. Athena could guide, protect, and advise, but she could never completely erase what destiny had already begun to weave. Perhaps that is what made her choice so remarkable. She did not seek to overturn fate. She sought someone capable of walking through it wisely. Inside the palace, the young prince sleeps peacefully while a cool breeze enters through narrow windows overlooking the sea. His breathing remains slow and even. His hands still bear the softness of childhood. Yet somewhere beyond dreams, the world is already changing around him. Across Greece, rival kings strengthen their armies. Ships grow larger each passing year. Bronze weapons emerge from busy workshops where blacksmiths labour beside glowing furnaces. Priests observe unusual flights of birds above sacred mountains. Travellers carry rumours between distant cities. Alliances quietly form. Old rivalries deepen beneath carefully spoken words exchanged during festivals and sacrifices. No one yet speaks openly of Troy. No one imagines 10 years of war. No one foresees wandering seas, hungry monsters, enchanted islands, grieving queens, or lonely shores where exhausted sailors will pray simply to see home once again. Yet some traditions preserve an intriguing story. They claim that one elderly seer, while offering sacrifice beneath an open sky, watched smoke twist against the direction of the wind. He reportedly whispered that a child living upon a western island would someday change the fate of both Greeks and Trojans alike. Whether this prophecy truly belonged to ancient memory or emerged through later storytelling remains uncertain. Scholars remain divided, and perhaps that uncertainty itself preserves its quiet magic. Far above the earth, beyond clouds touched by moonlight, the halls of Olympus remain awake. The mountain appears peaceful from below, crowned with drifting mist that glows beneath countless stars. But among the immortals, peace rarely lasts for long. Gods observe kingdoms much as shepherds watch distant flocks. They notice ambition before mortals recognize it themselves. They see promises that humans soon forget. They witness hidden fears carried silently within every heart. Athena stands apart from many of the other Olympians. She delights neither in reckless destruction nor meaningless displays of divine power. Her strength lives within thoughtful judgment. She teaches weaving because patterns matter. She teaches strategy because foresight preserves life. She honors builders, craftsmen, navigators, judges, philosophers, and careful rulers because civilization itself depends upon minds capable of looking beyond the next sunrise. Yet wisdom alone has limits. Knowledge without courage accomplishes little. Courage without wisdom often destroys itself. Rare indeed is the soul capable of carrying both. Perhaps that is why her gaze repeatedly returns toward the sleeping child upon distant Ithaca. Not because he is flawless, not because he is chosen above all others from birth, but because within him rests a restless curiosity that refuses simple answers. He will question. He will observe. He will adapt. Sometimes he will deceive. Sometimes he will fail. Sometimes his own cleverness will become his greatest enemy. And Athena knows something that many heroes never learn. Perfection rarely teaches wisdom. Struggle does. As the night grows deeper, cool mist drifts down from the hills and settles gently among the olive trees surrounding the palace. The sea continues its endless conversation with the shore, each wave arriving with patient certainty before slipping quietly back into darkness. Somewhere unseen, the owl returns to its branch, watching silently once more. Whether it truly serves as Athena's messenger, No mortal standing upon these quiet slopes could ever know, but generations yet unborn will remember that beneath these same stars, long before Troy rose in flames, before the wooden horse, before cyclopes, sirens, and wandering seas, the first quiet threads of one extraordinary friendship between goddess and mortal had already begun to weave themselves together, and with the coming of dawn, the child inside the palace will take another small step toward the destiny neither he nor anyone around him can yet imagine. The first light of dawn spread slowly across the Ionian Sea, turning the water from deep blue into soft silver. Cool morning air carries the scent of damp earth, crushed herbs, and distant wood smoke as the island of Ithaca quietly awakens. Fishermen untie their boats before the sun grows warm. Shepherds guide sleepy goats toward rocky pastures where wildflowers cling between stones. From the palace kitchens comes the comforting aroma of fresh bread baking beside glowing hearths. You walk among these peaceful sights, following the footsteps of a young prince whose greatest adventures still belong to the future. Odysseus grows in a kingdom where every day teaches patience. Ithaca cannot offer effortless abundance. Its fields are narrow, its mountains steep, its harbours small compared with the great ports of mainland Greece. Nothing comes easily here. Every olive harvested, every vineyard tended, every fishing voyage depends upon careful planning rather than overwhelming strength. Long before he ever commands warriors, the young prince learns to respect limits. He watches older sailors study winds before raising a sail. He observes farmers waiting for the proper season instead of demanding impossible harvests. Quietly, almost without realizing it, he begins learning the lesson Athena values above nearly every other. Wisdom begins with observation. His father, Laertes, is no reckless conqueror. Age has softened the fire of youth into thoughtful restraint. Rather than filling the palace with endless celebrations, he spends long hours walking among orchards or speaking with the craftsmen repairing tools and fishing nets. Sometimes Odysseus follows him through groves where ancient olive trees cast cool shadows upon the earth. Laertes rarely lectures, instead he asks questions. Why do some branches bear heavier fruit? Why does one sailor survive a storm while another does not? Why does one king keep loyal friends while another gathers only fearful followers? The boy quickly discovers that answers rarely arrive immediately. Thinking becomes a habit rather than a burden. His mother, Anticlea, offers a different kind of guidance. Her voice carries warmth even when correcting mistakes. She teaches him hospitality, reminding him that strangers may arrive carrying the favour of Zeus himself. In Greek belief, every unknown traveller deserved respect because the gods sometimes wandered the earth disguised as ordinary people. A careless insult offered to a weary visitor might unknowingly offend Olympus. The lesson settles deeply within the young prince, years later, when he encounters strangers across distant seas. These childhood memories will often guide his choices, although not always successfully. Yet another influence shapes his growing mind. Through Anticlea, Odysseus belongs to the family of the famed trickster Autolycus, whose reputation extends across Greece. Autolycus is admired, feared, and occasionally distrusted. Legends describe him as a master of persuasion, negotiation, disguise, and clever theft. Some stories even claim that Hermes himself granted him extraordinary gifts of cunning. Historians continue debating how much of these traditions reflect genuine Bronze Age memory and how much developed through centuries of storytelling. Regardless of their origin, the association matters. Ancient listeners understood immediately that intelligence flowed through this family like an inherited current. Whenever Autolycus visits Ithaca, the atmosphere inside the palace subtly changes. Servants whisper that no one can ever be completely certain whether the old traveller speaks plainly or hides another meaning beneath every sentence. Yet children find him endlessly fascinating. He knows distant kingdoms, unfamiliar customs, forgotten mountain paths. and the habits of men who believe themselves impossible to deceive. One evening, as the family gathers beside a crackling fire, Autolycus watches the boy studying the dancing flames instead of joining childish games. The old man's eyes narrow thoughtfully before he smiles. "A sharp blade cuts only what lies before it," he says quietly, "but a sharp mind cuts paths no one else can even see." The words settle into theorem without further explanation. Odysseus remembers them. Many years later, when armies stand helpless before impossible walls, those words will quietly return. Outside, darkness deepens across Ithaca. Stars emerge one by one above the sea while cool breezes rustle through cypress trees. Somewhere beyond the palace, an owl calls again. Perhaps it is coincidence, perhaps not. The Greeks often believed that repeated signs deserved attention. A single unusual event might be ignored. But when symbols appeared again and again, thoughtful people paused to consider whether unseen powers were quietly speaking. Athena rarely announced herself with thunder like Zeus or earthquakes like Poseidon. Her messages often required careful minds willing to notice small patterns. Odysseus seems naturally drawn towards such patterns. As he grows older, he spends hours wandering hillsides alone. Rather than chasing every animal he sees, he watches their movements. Rather than rushing across unfamiliar paths, he studies how streams carve valleys through stone. He notices that birds circle differently before rain arrives. He learns which plants survive dry summers and which springs continue flowing even during drought. None of these lessons appear heroic. No poet sings about them. Yet to Capeshu they build something far more lasting than simple strength. They teach attention. Attention becomes understanding. Understanding becomes wisdom. Sometimes visitors from neighbouring islands arrive, carrying tales of famous young princes. They speak of Ajax lifting enormous stones that ordinary men cannot move. They admire Diomedes practicing with spear and shield until sunset. They tell stories of Achilles, whose astonishing speed already inspires admiration among warriors. Listening quietly from the edge of these conversations, Odysseus cannot help comparing himself with heroes whose gifts seem far greater than his own. For the first time, doubt enters his heart. Perhaps he will never become legendary. Perhaps Ithaca is too small. Perhaps greatness belongs only to those born stronger. Ancient storytellers rarely ignored such moments because they understood that every hero first confronts uncertainty before discovering purpose. Confidence earned through struggle possesses greater meaning than confidence granted from birth. One autumn afternoon, as grey clouds gather over the western sea, Odysseus climbs alone toward a high ridge overlooking the harbour. Wind presses against his cloak while waves crash against dark cliffs far below. There he discovers a weathered shrine dedicated to Athena. It is small, hardly more than a simple stone altar surrounded by olive branches left by shepherds and sailors. A shallow bronze bowl still holds traces of olive oil offered during earlier prayers. Without fully knowing why, the young prince kneels. He says no elaborate prayer. He asks for no riches, no victory, no fame. Instead he whispers only one request. "Help me understand." The wind suddenly falls silent. The sea grows strangely calm despite the gathering storm. Then an owl lands upon the broken wall beside the shrine and watches him without fear. The moment lasts only a heartbeat before the bird lifts effortlessly into the darkening sky. Did Athena truly answer? No surviving poet can say with certainty. Another interpretation suggests that later generations added this story to symbolize Odysseus's lifelong relationship with the goddess. Others believe an older oral tradition may preserve the memory of a sacred experience long before Homer shaped his epics. Like many moments in Greek mythology, certainty remains beyond reach. Yet the symbolism would have been unmistakable to ancient listeners. The goddess had not promised protection. She had not guaranteed success. She had simply acknowledged a soul willing to seek wisdom before power. Far away across the Greek world, Kingdoms continue their ordinary lives, unaware that destiny is quietly gathering them together. Princes mature, alliances shift, children become rulers, ships are built in growing numbers. Priests studying sacrificial flames occasionally speak of unsettled years approaching, though their warnings remain frustratingly vague. The prophecy heard by the old seer in the previous generation has not been forgotten entirely. Some remember only fragments: a child from a western island, the fate of mighty cities, a name carried across the sea. Whether those words truly belong to divine foresight or were woven into memory after Troy's destruction, no one can now determine. But on Ithaca, beneath another peaceful evening sky, the young prince continues learning lessons no battlefield could ever teach. The greatest journeys often begin long before anyone realizes they have already taken the first step. Several years pass as quietly as waves polishing smooth stones along Ithaca's rugged shores. Seasons circle one another with gentle certainty. Spring brings the scent of blossoming almond trees. Summer fills the hills with dry grass, humming beneath countless insects. Autumn paints the vineyards in a deep purple, while winter storms wrap the island in cool rain carried from the western sea. During these peaceful years, Odysseus grows taller, stronger, and more confident. Yet the habit of careful observation never leaves him, even when other young nobles compete to display their strength. You notice his eyes lingering upon details that everyone else ignores. There comes a time, however, when every young prince must leave the familiar safety of home. Ancient Greek custom often encouraged noble sons to visit the households of their relatives, strengthening family ties while learning different ways of ruling and living. For Odysseus, that journey leads eastward across the sea toward the lands of his grandfather. Autolycus, the voyage itself is calm. Cool winds fill linen sails while dolphins briefly appear beside the narrow ship before disappearing beneath sparkling water. Sailors quietly thank Poseidon for peaceful seas, although everyone aboard understands that the sea god's generosity can change without warning as you step ashore. The countryside feels different from Ithaca. The mountains rise higher, clothed in dense forests where ancient oaks and towering pines cover the slopes. Mist lingers each morning among narrow valleys, and clear streams tumble over polished stones before disappearing beneath tangled roots. Hunters speak softly here, not because they fear one another, but because they respect the wilderness. The forests seem old enough to remember stories that no human voice still carries. Autolycus welcomes his grandson warmly, though age has done little to soften the alertness in his eyes. His smile remains difficult to interpret. Even while embracing family, he appears to study every expression, every hesitation, every unspoken thought. "You have grown," the old man says. "So have your questions." Odysseus laughs quietly. "I hope they never stop." Autolycus nods with unmistakable approval. Neither does Athena. The remark passes almost casually, Fis. "Yet you remember the owl beside the shrine on Ithaca." Whether Autolycus knows more than he chooses to reveal remains impossible to say. Some traditions portray him as unusually favoured by Hermes, able to recognise hidden truths concealed from ordinary people. Other versions simply describe him as remarkably perceptive after a lifetime spent reading human nature. The mystery survives because ancient storytellers never insisted upon a single answer. Several days later, preparations begin for a great hunt. The mountain forests shelter wild boars unlike the smaller animals found near villages. These creatures possess enormous strength, thick hides, and curved tusks capable of killing experienced hunters. Bringing one down earns respect throughout the household. More importantly, the hunt serves as a test. Young nobles prove not only courage but judgment. Recklessness is admired by no one who hopes to return alive. Before sunrise, the hunting party gathers beneath towering pines. Spears gleam faintly in the torchlight while hunting dogs pace impatiently. Noses lifted towards scents carried upon the cold air. Dew clings to every blade of grass somewhere high above. unseen birds begin greeting the coming dawn. As the hunters prepare to enter the forest, an elderly servant suddenly pauses. An owl crosses silently between the trees before vanishing into the mist. Several men exchange thoughtful glances. One murmurs that Athena watches. Another quietly replies that the goddess watches every hunt. No one speaks further. Among the Greeks, omens rarely forced action. Instead, they invited reflection. A wise person acknowledged the sign but still accepted responsibility for every decision that followed. The forest swallows the hunting party. Morning light filters through countless branches, painting shifting patterns across moss-covered stones. Every breath carries the rich scent of pine resin, damp earth, and fallen leaves beginning to decay beneath the season's slow passage. Dogs weave between trees, occasionally freezing before rushing onward again. Hunters spread apart with practiced discipline, communicating through brief gestures instead of loud voices. Odysseus moves gracefully. Unlike some of the younger men eager for glory, he resists the temptation to race ahead. He watches broken branches, fresh tracks pressed into soft mud, trees where bark has been scraped away. The forest begins speaking. He simply listens. Autolycus notices. Without praise or interruption, he quietly adjusts his own path until grandson and grandfather move through the woods within sight of one another. Hours pass, then the dogs erupt into furious barking. Birds explode upward to run about. A deep growl echoes through the undergrowth. The enormous boar bursts from dense vegetation with astonishing speed. For one suspended heartbeat, everything becomes perfectly still. Sunlight flashes across curved tusks. Steam pours from the animal's nostrils. Its small dark eyes burn with fierce determination. It does not flee. It charges. Several hunters thrust their spears too early. The boar twists away with terrifying agility. One man falls backward. Another barely escapes as tusks slash through empty air. Odysseus steps forward, not because he believes himself fearless. Quite the opposite. His heart pounds so violently that he feels it against his ribs. Cold fear races through every muscle. Yet amid the chaos, his mind remains unexpectedly clear. He remembers watching fishermen wait before casting their nets. He remembers Laertes refusing hurried decisions. He remembers the quiet owl at Athena's shrine. Above all, he remembers that panic blinds. The boar lunges directly toward him. He raises his spear, a fraction too late. The beast crashes forward. One gleaming tusk tears across his thigh before he can leap aside. White-hot pain surges through his body. Warm blood stains the forest floor. For an instant the world narrows into pain, noise, a blurred motion. Yet even while falling, Odysseus refuses to release his weapon. Instead of pulling away from danger, he drives the spear downward with every remaining ounce of strength. The bronze point strikes. The boar roars. It stumbles several paces before collapsing beneath tangled branches. Silence follows. Only heavy breathing fills the forest. Hunters slowly gather around the fallen animal. One kneels beside the wounded prince. Another tears cloth into bandages. Autolycus arrives without haste, studying both the dead boar and his injured grandson. "You did not defeat it through strength," he says quietly. "You defeated it because you kept thinking after everyone else stopped." The wound is deep. Blood continues flowing despite careful bandaging. Several hunters fashion a litter from branches while others begin the slow journey back toward the estate. Every step sends fresh pain through Odysseus' leg, yet he never complains aloud. Above the forest canopy, clouds drift across the afternoon sky. A cool wind carries the scent of approaching rain. Some later traditions claim that as the wounded prince was carried from the mountains, a single owl flew above the procession before disappearing toward the west. Historians continue debating whether this detail belonged to early oral tradition or emerged centuries later through temple storytelling. Whatever its origin, ancient audiences would have understood the symbolism immediately. Athena had not prevented suffering. She had witnessed it. That distinction mattered. The Greeks rarely imagined the gods removing hardship from those they favoured. Divine companionship often meant receiving the wisdom needed to endure suffering rather than escaping it altogether. For many days, Odysseus remains confined indoors while healers clean and bind the terrible wound. The sharp smell of medicinal herbs fills the chamber. Olive oil softens damaged skin while crushed leaves cool the burning pain. Outside his window, autumn rains wash the mountains clean. The wound slowly closes, but it never disappears. A pale scar remains, small enough to overlook, permanent enough to change everything. Years from now, after monsters, wars, storms, disguises, and impossible journeys, that single scar will speak louder than any name. It will prove who he truly is when even those closest to him no longer recognize his face. Perhaps destiny had already chosen that moment. Or perhaps wisdom simply leaves its marks upon those willing to survive. As Odysseus finally rises and takes his first careful steps, he understands something no child can learn from comfort alone. Pain can become memory. Memory can become judgment. And judgment, patiently carried through many years, may one day become the very quality that causes a goddess to place her faith in a mortal. The scar heals long before the lesson does. As the months quietly pass, you notice that Odysseus walks with the same steady stride as before. Yet something inside him has changed. He has learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender to it. Whenever his fingers unconsciously brush the pale mark upon his leg, he remembers the wild forest, the charging boar, and the moment when calm thought proves stronger than panic. The memory remains silent, but it accompanies him everywhere. The journey back to Ithaca feels different from the one that first carried him away. The sea is calm, its surface shimmering beneath gentle autumn sunlight. Gulls circle above the mast while sailors sing old rowing songs whose melodies have drifted across Greek waters for generations. Odysseus spends much of the voyage standing near the bow, watching distant islands slowly appear and disappear along the horizon. He asks the helmsman why one current feels warmer than another. He wonders why certain birds never stray far from land. Even now, after surviving his first great trial, curiosity remains stronger than pride. Perhaps this constant questioning is the first quality that truly separates him from many other heroes. Ancient Greek tradition often celebrated mighty warriors whose names echoed through battlefields. Yet Athena represented another path entirely. She admired those who sought understanding before action. In countless temples dedicated to her, craftsmen prayed before beginning their work. Judges offered sacrifices before difficult decisions, and sailors quietly requested clear judgment before trusting themselves to uncertain seas. Strength belonged to many gods. Wisdom belonged uniquely to her. As you return with Odysseus to Ithaca, preparations are already underway for one of Athena's annual festivals. Throughout the Greek world, these celebrations differed from city to city, yet certain customs remained familiar. Women carefully weave new garments for the goddess. Olive oil fills polished clay jars waiting to become sacred offerings. Bronze workers polish helmets and shields that will be displayed before her altars, reminding everyone that intelligence and disciplined warfare cannot be separated. The palace itself becomes unusually lively. Servants sweep courtyards until every stone shines beneath the afternoon sun. Musicians arrive carrying lyres. Shepherds lead healthy sheep chosen for sacrifice. Children gather fresh olive branches to decorate the pathways leading toward the small sanctuary overlooking the harbour. Early on the morning of the festival, cool mist still hangs above the sea as people begin climbing the sacred hill. You walk beside them, feeling smooth stone beneath your sandals while the scent of crushed rosemary rises with every step. Ahead, the temple is modest compared with the magnificent sanctuaries that later generations will build in Athens, but its simplicity carries its own quiet dignity. Whitewashed walls catch the first golden light of sunrise. Bronze bowls already burn with fragrant incense. Thin streams of smoke rise peacefully into the still morning air. Inside the sanctuary stands a carved wooden image of Athena, ancient enough that no one remembers who first shaped it. Time has softened its features. Generations of worshippers have touched the smooth wood while offering silent prayers. Fresh woven cloth drapes across its shoulders, and an olive wreath rests gently upon its head, unlike statues of Ares, whose fierce expression celebrates the violence of battle. Athena's face appears calm, alert, thoughtful. She does not promise victory. She promises judgment. Priests begin the ceremony with hymns whose words have echoed across Greece for centuries. Their voices rise together, filling the temple before flowing outward into the brightening morning. Olive oil is poured slowly over the altar. Wine follows. The fragrance of burning laurel mingles with sea air drifting through the open entrance. Odysseus watches every movement with quiet concentration. He notices how nothing is hurried. Every gesture possesses purpose. Every silence carries meaning. The Greeks believed that ritual itself trained the mind. By moving carefully before the gods, people learned to move carefully through life. Impatience belonged to chaos. Measured action reflected divine order. As the sacrifice concludes, an elderly priest speaks not of military conquest, but of wisdom. The sharpest spear, he says, cannot defend a foolish decision. The words settle deeply into those listening. Odysseus lowers his eyes, without realizing it. He recalls Autolycus standing over the fallen boar. He kept thinking after everyone else stopped. Different voices. The same lesson. This quiet connection becomes another thread woven through his life. Some historians believe festivals like these served an important social purpose beyond religion alone. They reminded scattered island communities that intelligence, cooperation, and justice were essential if Greek civilization hoped to survive among unpredictable seas and rival kingdoms. Another interpretation suggests that Athena gradually became the ideal protector of ordered society, because her myths reflected values increasingly admired during the growth of city-states. Whatever explanation one prefers, the emotional truth remains remarkably consistent. Those who sought Athena were expected to cultivate their own judgment rather than simply wait for miracles. Later that afternoon, after the crowds have dispersed, Odysseus lingers near the sacred grove surrounding the sanctuary. Ancient olive trees cast long shadows across the hillside while cicadas sing beneath the warmth of the declining sun. The leaves shimmer softly each time a breeze arrives from the sea. There he encounters an old woman gathering fallen branches. Her clothing is simple. Her hands bear the marks of decades spent working the land. She smiles as the young prince offers to help. Together they collect dry wood in peaceful silence before she finally speaks. Do you know why the olive tree belongs to Athena? Odysseus shakes his head. Because it grows slowly. She smiles again. That is part of the answer. She gently places one weathered hand upon the rough trunk. This tree survives storms that destroy others. It bends without breaking. It feeds families for generations. It asks for patience before offering abundance. She looks toward the distant sea. So does wisdom. When Odysseus turns to ask another question, the woman has already begun walking down the hillside. Whether she was simply an ordinary villager or someone sent by the goddess herself remains one of those small mysteries that ancient storytellers quietly treasured. Scholars remain divided because no early source identifies her. Later temple traditions occasionally hint that Athena herself sometimes preferred humble disguises when teaching mortals. The uncertainty only deepens the story's gentle charm. That evening, clouds gather far beyond the western horizon. Distant lightning briefly illuminates the edge of the sea, though no thunder yet reaches Ithaca. Sailors watching from the harbour remark that the storm remains many hours away. Odysseus climbs once more toward the shrine before darkness fully settles. He brings no elaborate offering, only a small branch cut from one of his father's olive trees. He lays it carefully upon the altar. I still do not understand everything, he whispers, but I wish to. The wind stirs, the temple lamps flicker. Above the sanctuary, an owl glides silently from one olive tree to another before disappearing into the gathering dusk. No voice speaks. No vision appears. Athena remains as she often does, present through silence rather than spectacle, as night spreads across Ithaca. Stars slowly emerge above the island one after another. The approaching storm flashes occasionally along the far horizon. Beautiful but distant, it feels almost like a reminder that beyond this peaceful kingdom, larger events continue gathering strength. Across Greece, young princes mature into ambitious rulers. Older license ends quietly shift. Messengers carry news between kingdoms. In Sparta, a child named Helen is growing into extraordinary beauty, though few yet imagine how profoundly her future will reshape the world. On Mount Pelion, Achilles continues learning beneath the wise centaur Chiron. Elsewhere, kings dream of glory, wealth, and lasting fame. The threads of countless lives are slowly drawing together. No one can yet see the pattern, not even Odysseus. Yet high above the sleeping island, beneath a sky filled with silent stars, Athena continues watching. She has not chosen her champion because he is the strongest. She has not chosen him because he is flawless. She watches because every question he asks draws him a little farther from simple certainty and a little closer to true wisdom. And the goddess knows that before the greatest war of the ancient world begins, Greece will need not merely a hero who can win battles, but one who can still think clearly when everyone else has forgotten how. Several more peaceful years drift across Greece like slow-moving clouds over the Aegean. The young prince of Ithaca grows into a man whose confidence now rests less upon youthful ambition than quiet self-control. His shoulders broaden from long days spent hunting, sailing, and training with spear and shield, yet what distinguishes him most is still invisible. He has learned to pause before speaking. He watches faces as carefully as horizons. He notices hesitation in another person's voice long before others recognize it themselves, without realizing it. He has become exactly the sort of observer Athena has always admired. One spring morning, a royal messenger arrives by ship. His vessel carries the colours of Sparta. The entire harbour gathers to watch as sailors lower the gangplank and present gifts wrapped in fine linen. Such visits rarely occur without important purpose. Throughout the Greek world, invitations between kings are more than polite gestures. Every banquet, marriage negotiation, and religious festival possesses the potential to reshape alliances stretching across dozens of kingdoms. The messenger kneels before Laertes. King Tyndareus of Sparta requests the presence of noble rulers and worthy princes from across Greece. No further explanation is offered. None is necessary. Everyone understands that something extraordinary is unfolding. Word spreads quickly through Ithaca's narrow valleys. Farmers discuss the news while tending vineyards. Fishermen speculate as they repair their nets beneath shaded docks. Even children sense unusual excitement moving quietly through the palace. Odysseus prepares for the voyage without celebration. He knows little about what awaits him beyond rumours carried by travellers. Some speak of magnificent feasts, others mention diplomatic negotiations. A few whisper of Helen, daughter of Tyndareus, whose beauty has already begun attracting attention far beyond Sparta itself. The sea crossing is peaceful. Gentle winds fill the sail while sunlight dances upon endless blue water. At night, the crew navigates by familiar constellations whose names have guided Greek sailors for generations. Odysseus spends long hours watching the stars instead of sleeping. He remembers the old priest who once said that careful minds should always observe before acting, even now. He feels no urgency to guess what awaits him. When the coast of Laconia finally rises from the sea, the difference from rugged Ithaca is immediately striking. Broad, fertile plains stretch inland beneath distant mountains. Rich farmland surrounds prosperous villages. Roads carry merchants, soldiers, priests, and travellers toward the royal city. Compared with his modest island kingdom, Sparta seems vast. The Palace of Tyndareus welcomes visitors from nearly every corner of the Greek world. Bronze armour gleams beneath afternoon sunlight. Horses stamp impatiently within spacious courtyards. Servants carry baskets overflowing with figs, cheese, olives, roasted lamb, and fresh bread. Musicians fill shaded halls with gentle melodies while noble families greet one another according to ancient customs of hospitality. As you walk beside Odysseus through the great hall, familiar names begin appearing one after another. Menelaus, Ajax, Diomedes, Idomeneus, Patroclus. Young princes whose reputations will one day echo through poetry have gathered here while still untouched by war. And among them moves another figure, tall, golden-haired, remarkably handsome. Paris of Troy has not yet entered this story, but Helen already has. She appears only briefly across the crowded hall, surrounded by attendants carrying woven garments and ceremonial offerings. No description fully captures the effect her presence has upon the assembled princes. Ancient poets repeatedly struggled to explain it. Some emphasized physical beauty. Others suggested that Aphrodite herself granted Helen an almost supernatural grace impossible to separate from divine influence. Modern historians sometimes wonder whether such descriptions symbolize political importance rather than literal appearance. Another interpretation suggests that generations of storytellers gradually elevated Helen until she became the embodiment of irresistible desire itself. Whatever is the truth, every eye follows her, including Odysseus. But unlike many others, he does not lose himself in admiration. He watches something else, the tension, the silence, the careful calculations unfolding behind polite smiles. Dozens of powerful rulers now desire the same bride. Every rejected suitor possesses warriors. Every disappointed king commands loyal allies. One careless decision could plunge Greece into endless bloodshed. Athena's student recognizes the true danger long before anyone speaks it aloud. That evening, Tyndareus summons a private gathering of trusted guests. Torches burn steadily along stone walls while servants quietly withdraw, leaving only rulers and princes within the chamber. The aging king appears troubled. His daughter deserves freedom to choose her husband, yet every possible choice threatens violence from those left disappointed. For several long moments, no one speaks. Then Odysseus rises. He does not offer a speech filled with grand promises. Instead, he asks a question. What does every man in this room value more than winning today? The others exchange uncertain glances. Their kingdoms, their families, their futures. Slowly, understanding begins spreading from one face to another. Odysseus continues, "If every suitor swears before the gods to defend Helen's chosen husband against anyone who threatens their marriage, then no honourable man may later attack without breaking a sacred oath." Silence returns, but now it feels different, thoughtful, measured. The proposal is astonishingly simple. Rather than preventing rivalry, it transforms rivalry into mutual responsibility. King Tyndareus studies the young prince for a long time. At last he sighs. "You have preserved Greece before it has even been endangered." The oath is accepted. Sacrifices are prepared. Priests purify the altar with water drawn before sunrise. White wool adorns the chosen animals. Wine is poured. Sacred fire crackles beneath the open sky while every prince places his hand upon the sacrifice and swears before Zeus, Athena, and the other Olympians to defend Helen's future marriage. The ceremony feels solemn rather than triumphant. The Greeks believed that spoken oaths carried immense spiritual weight. Words offered before the gods became living obligations. Breaking them invited divine punishment that might not arrive immediately, but could follow generations. As the final prayer ends, a sudden gust of wind sweeps across the altar. The flames bend sharply eastward. Several priests exchange uneasy glances. One elderly seer quietly whispers that every oath demands its price. No one asks him to explain. Perhaps he cannot. Prophecy often revealed only fragments. Its full meaning became visible only after destiny unfolded. Odysseus watches the fire until it steadies once more. For reasons he cannot explain, an uncomfortable feeling settles within him. He has solved today's crisis, yet he senses another has quietly begun. Many years later, ancient storytellers would point to this very moment as one of the greatest examples of Athena's influence. She had not descended from Olympus in shining armour. She had not spoken through thunder or miracle. Instead, wisdom appeared through a mortal mind capable of seeing consequences others overlooked. Perhaps this is what truly delighted the goddess. Not obedience, understanding. As celebrations continue over the following days, Helen eventually chooses Menelaus. The decision is accepted peacefully. Music fills the palace. Wine flows generously. Guests praise the wisdom of Tyndareus and the clever solution proposed by the king of Ithaca. Odysseus receives quiet gratitude but little public glory. He seems perfectly content with that. Unlike many rulers, he has never sought admiration for its own sake. Yet Athena notices, far above the mortal world, if later temple traditions preserve even a hint of truth, the grey-eyed goddess observes another quiet victory. Strength had not preserved peace. Wisdom had. As the gathering gradually comes to an end, Odysseus prepares for the journey home. Before leaving Sparta, he pauses beside a sacred olive tree growing near the palace entrance. Its trunk is old, its branches heavy with silver-green leaves moving softly in the evening breeze. An owl lands briefly among those branches. It watches him, then disappears into the darkening sky. Whether anyone else notices remains uncertain. Perhaps only you, perhaps only Odysseus, or perhaps only Athena. The sea voyage back to Ithaca begins beneath calm stars. The oath sworn in Sparta now lies quietly behind him. He believes he has prevented war. He cannot yet imagine that the very promise born from his wisdom will one day summon him away from everything he loves. The thread he wove to preserve peace has already become the thread that destiny will use to lead him towards Troy. The voyage home carries Odysseus across waters calmer than any he can remember. Each dawn paints the sea in pale gold before the sun climbs above the horizon. Flying fish break the surface for only an instant, leaving circles that slowly disappear into the endless blue. The rhythm of the oars, the creak of timber, and the steady pull of the wind create a peaceful music that seems older than any kingdom. Standing at the bow, you sense that something inside him has quietly changed. The oath sworn in Sparta remains far behind, yet it returns to his thoughts more often than he expects. Wisdom has solved one problem, but wisdom has also created a responsibility that cannot easily be forgotten. When Ithaca finally appears, rising from the western sea beneath a veil of morning mist, Odysseus feels an emotion deeper than simple relief. Home. The Greeks possessed many words for courage, honour and glory, but few ideas carried greater emotional weight than homecoming. A man's house was not merely a shelter. It contained the graves of ancestors, the hearth blessed by Hector, the olive trees planted by generations before him, and the family whose memory would continue after his own life ended. To defend one's home was to defend one's place within the order of the world. Perhaps this is why Athena admired him. Unlike heroes driven only by conquest, Odysseus always measured greatness against the thought of returning. The palace welcomes him with quiet celebration. Laertes embraces his son not with extravagant speeches, but with the simple warmth of a father grateful for safe return. Anticlea studies the scar upon his leg before gently placing her hand over it. "It healed well," she says. "It reminds me," Odysseus answers. She smiles. "Good wounds should." Those few words remain with him long afterward. Ancient storytellers often suggested that scars possessed meaning beyond physical injury. They became visible memories, proof that experience had reshaped the person who carried them. A hero without wounds inspired admiration. A hero who learned from them inspired trust. Months pass peacefully across Ithaca. Harvest follows harvest. Merchants arrive with bronze tools, fine cloth, and fragrant oils from distant islands. Shepherds guide flocks across familiar hills, while fishermen return each evening with silver nets heavy from the sea. Life settles into an almost gentle rhythm, and for a time it seems possible that destiny has forgotten the little island altogether. It's during these peaceful days that another important journey quietly begins. Among the neighbouring kingdoms lives Penelope, daughter of Achilles. Unlike Helen, whose beauty has already become famous throughout Greece, Penelope is remembered for something less dramatic, but perhaps more enduring. Those who meet her speak first of intelligence. She listens carefully before offering opinions. She rarely wastes words. Servants respect her not because they fear punishment, but because she notices every person within her household. Some later traditions even suggest that Athena watched Penelope with nearly as much affection as she watched Odysseus, seeing in both mortals the same quiet discipline of mind. Historians continue debating how old this tradition may be, yet the partnership between them certainly reflects many qualities the goddess herself embodied. When Odysseus first meets Penelope, there are no thunderbolts from Olympus, no miraculous signs, no overwhelming passion. Instead, they speak, longer than either expected. They discuss ships, harvests, travellers, the difficulties of ruling small kingdoms surrounded by stronger neighbours. Penelope asks thoughtful questions. Odysseus finds himself answering honestly. Hours pass unnoticed. For perhaps the first time in his life, he discovers someone who understands not merely his words, but the careful thinking behind them. Their marriage follows with the blessings expected among noble families. Priests offer sacrifices before sacred fires, while musicians fill the air with quiet songs celebrating prosperity and harmony. Olive oil glistens upon polished altars. Fresh flowers decorate the palace courtyard. The smell of roasted lamb mingles with warm bread, honey cakes, and sweet wine shared among guests. That night, beneath a sky crowded with brilliant stars, an elderly priest quietly pauses while observing the heavens. One bright star disappears behind a drifting cloud before emerging once more. He smiles faintly. "What is hidden," he murmurs, "may yet return." Whether he speaks of marriage, destiny, or something far beyond either remains uncertain. Odysseus hears the words. He remembers them. Years later, they will echo through his mind with painful clarity. As husband and wife begin their life together, they decide to build a new chamber within the palace. Craftsmen gather cedar beams, polished stone, and carefully carved furniture. Yet one task Odysseus refuses to surrender to anyone else. At the centre of the courtyard stands an ancient olive tree, whose roots reach deep into the rocky earth. Rather than cutting it down, he builds around it. Stone walls rise, timber beams join together. The living trunk becomes one corner of the room itself. From that same rooted tree, he carefully shapes their marriage bed. Every stroke of the bronze tools fills the quiet chamber with a scent of fresh olive wood. Penelope watches without interruption. When he finishes, she gently places her hand upon the smooth carved frame. "This bed cannot be moved." Odysseus smiles. "Neither should our home." The Greeks loved such symbols because they joined practical life with deeper meaning. The rooted bed represented permanence, unlike ordinary furniture carried away during war or disaster. This bed belonged to the earth itself. Anyone wishing to remove it would first have to destroy the living tree beneath the house. Another interpretation survives among later scholars. Some believe Homer used the rooted olive tree to reflect Athena's enduring presence within the marriage itself. Since the olive belonged to the goddess, the bed quietly suggested that wisdom, patience, and stability formed the true foundation of their union. Whether intentional or not, the symbolism became one of the most beloved images in all Greek literature. Life grows increasingly peaceful. Penelope proves every bit as thoughtful as Odysseus hoped. When disputes arise among servants, she resolves them with fairness. When merchants negotiate difficult agreements, she notices details others overlook. Evenings often find the two of them walking together above the harbour, as cool sea breezes move through the olive groves. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they remain comfortably silent. Not every companionship requires constant words. Athena, had she truly watched, could hardly have failed to approve, yet destiny rarely allows perfect happiness to continue untouched. One night, after many months of calm, Penelope awakens from a troubling dream. She finds herself standing alone upon the palace roof while countless white birds circle above the sea. Suddenly a great eagle descends from the clouds. The smaller birds scatter in every direction until only silence remains. Then the eagle turns toward the west and disappears beyond the horizon. She tells Odysseus the dream at sunrise. He listens carefully. Neither of them attempts to explain it. The Greeks respected dreams, especially those arriving just before dawn. Some believed such visions carried messages from the gods. Others argued that dreams merely revealed hidden fears already living within the human heart. Ancient writers preserved both possibilities, allowing uncertainty to remain. Several days later, a wandering seer visits Ithaca seeking hospitality. After receiving food and rest, he quietly remarks while studying the palace courtyard, "The roots of your house run deep." He pauses before adding one final sentence, but even the deepest roots cannot prevent branches from bending in distant storms. No further explanation follows. Odysseus thanks him politely. Penelope watches the old man disappear down the hillside until he vanishes among the olive trees. Neither speaks of the prophecy again, yet the words remain, like seeds waiting beneath winter soil, far away across the Greek world. Events continue, moving almost invisibly toward their appointed meeting. In Sparta, Menelaus and Helen begin their married life. Across the sea in Troy, a young prince named Paris grows into adulthood beneath the towers of Priam's magnificent city. On Mount Olympus, the gods continue observing the choices of both mortals and immortals. For now, however, Ithaca rests peacefully beneath another quiet evening. The rooted bed stands firm within its chamber. The olive tree continues reaching toward the stars, and neither Odysseus nor Penelope can yet imagine that one day this simple bed, built around a living tree, will become the single proof capable of restoring an entire life shattered by 20 years of absence. The years that follow become the happiest Odysseus has ever known. Dawn after dawn arrives without omen or alarm. The palace echoes with ordinary sounds that seem almost sacred in their simplicity. Millstones grind fresh grain before sunrise. Shepherds call softly across the hills. Children laugh within the courtyards while swallows build nests beneath the roof beams each spring. From the harbour comes the familiar creak of fishing boats returning with their morning catch, their sails glowing pale gold beneath the first light. You begin to understand why home, more than glory, quietly becomes the centre of Odysseus's heart. Soon another blessing arrives. Penelope gives birth to a son. The entire palace celebrates, though not with extravagant display. Ancient Greek households understood that new life deserved gratitude before celebration. Priests offer wine upon the family altar, while fragrant incense curls gently toward the ceiling. Laertes lifts the infant with careful hands. Smiling more openly than anyone has seen in many years, the child receives the name Telemachus. Odysseus spends long evenings holding the sleeping boy, while watching moonlight shimmer across the sea beyond the palace windows. Sometimes Penelope quietly joins him, without speaking. Together they listen to the peaceful rhythm of waves striking the rocky shore below. Nothing in those moments suggests that the world beyond Ithaca is already beginning to change. The rooted olive tree beside their chamber continues to grow. Its branches spread wider each season. Its roots reach deeper beneath the stone floor. The image comforts Odysseus. He believes his life has finally found its proper shape. Yet throughout Greek mythology, lasting peace often exists only for a little while before destiny gently knocks upon the door. The first sign arrives not through thunder or earthquake, but through rumour. Merchants returning from the eastern sea begin speaking of unusual events in Sparta. Their stories disagree in many details. as travellers' tales often do. Some claim a Trojan prince has recently visited the court of Menelaus. Others whisper of growing tension between kingdoms. Still others insist that Aphrodite herself has woven invisible desires into mortal hearts. No one knows the full truth. Scholars today continue debating which traditions preserve older memories and which emerged later as poets reshaped the legend. Ancient audiences themselves accepted that different storytellers preserved different versions. Mystery was not considered a flaw but part of the living nature of myth. Weeks later, certainty finally arrives. A lookout standing above Ithaca's harbour notices unfamiliar sails approaching from the east. The ships bear royal banners. Their crews row with unusual urgency. Odysseus watches silently from the palace walls as the vessels enter the harbour, without music or ceremony. Before they even reach the docks, he feels a heaviness settle within him that he cannot explain. The old priest's words return. Every oath demands its price. The messengers climb the palace steps. Dust covers their cloaks after long travel across Greece. Their leader bows respectfully before Laertes, then turns toward Odysseus. Helen has been taken. Silence fills the hall. No one moves. For a long moment, even the hearth fire seems strangely quiet. The messenger continues. Paris, Prince of Troy, has carried her across the sea. Whether Helen departed willingly or by force remains uncertain even now. Some ancient poets describe irresistible love inspired by Aphrodite. Others speak of abduction. Still others preserve traditions suggesting political motives hidden beneath the famous romance. The question has never been fully resolved, and perhaps that uncertainty has helped the story endure through thousands of years. For Odysseus, however, the details scarcely matter. He remembers the oath. Every prince who stood within the palace of Sparta promised to defend Helen's marriage. That promise now calls every one of them. The messenger's voice grows quieter. King Agamemnon summons all who swore before the gods. The words strike harder than any spear. Odysseus lowers his eyes toward the stone floor. The solution he once offered to preserve peace has become the chain drawing Greece toward war. That evening, after the palace has fallen silent, he walks alone through the olive grove overlooking the sea. The air carries the scent of damp leaves after a brief rain. Far below, waves continue their endless rhythm, utterly indifferent to the worries of kings. He remembers every lesson of his youth. The owl at Athena's shrine, the scar beneath his cloak, the rooted bed, Penelope's dream, the wandering seers warning about branches bending in distant storms. One by one, the quiet signs of earlier years begin fitting together like pieces of a pattern only now becoming visible. For the first time, he wonders whether wisdom sometimes reveals consequences too late to prevent them. When he returns to the palace, Penelope is waiting. She has already guessed. "You must go." He does not answer immediately. Instead, he looks toward the sleeping chamber where Telemachus rests. He is still so small. Penelope gently takes his hand. "So were you once." Neither speaks again for several moments. The silence between them carries more sorrow than words could ever express. According to one famous tradition preserved by later storytellers, Odysseus cannot accept what destiny demands. Rather than sailing immediately to join the Greek kings, he devises a remarkable plan. When the envoys return the following morning, they find the king of Ithaca behaving strangely. He has yoked an ox and a donkey together, animals that no sensible farmer would ever pair. He guides the uneven team across a field while scattering salt instead of grain. His hair is combed. His eyes seem vacant. He mumbles to himself as though reason has abandoned him. The visitors exchange uneasy glances. Has the clever prince truly lost his mind? Some appear convinced, others remain uncertain. Among them stands Palamedes, himself famous for intelligence. He watches far more carefully than the others. Madness, he knows, often reveals itself through confusion. Odysseus appears almost too deliberate, Almost too convincing, Palamedes decides upon a categorically terrible test. Without warning, he lifts the infant Telemachus from Penelope's arms and places the child directly before the advancing plough. Gasps echo across the field. The ox continues forward. The donkey follows. At the final instant, Odysseus pulls sharply on the reins, turning the plough aside before it can reach his son. Silence falls. Palamedes slowly nods. A madman would not have seen the child. Odysseus closes his eyes. The deception is finished. He cannot escape the oath. Ancient audiences often admire this episode because it revealed something essential about his character. He does not refuse the war from cowardice. He refuses because he already understands its cost. Unlike many princes eager for glory, Odysseus knows that victory is purchased with absent fathers, grieving wives, and fatherless children leave wounds that no triumph can fully heal. Some historians believe this story may have developed later to explain why Odysseus appears so reluctant throughout portions of the Trojan tradition. Others argue that it reflects an older memory of political resistance among Greek leaders before the expedition. No surviving evidence allows certainty, yet emotionally the episode feels deeply true. The man Athena favours is not the one rushing toward battle. He is the one who understands what battle steals. That night, after the messengers depart, Odysseus climbs once more to the small sanctuary overlooking Ithaca. The stars shine brilliantly above the silent sea. He places both hands upon the familiar stone altar. I have always asked for wisdom. His voice is barely louder than the wind. But wisdom does not tell me how to leave my family. The olive leaves rustle softly. An owl appears upon the highest branch. It watches him without moving. No answer comes. Athena offers neither command or comfort, only presence. Perhaps because some roads, however wisely chosen, must still be walked alone. At dawn the harbour awakens before sunrise. Ships are prepared. Bronze armour catches the first pale light. Penelope stands beside the rooted olive tree holding Telemachus, who is still too young to understand why his father must leave. Odysseus looks at them once more. He believes he will return in a few months, perhaps a year. No one standing upon the shore imagines that nearly 20 years will pass before this family is reunited. The sea breeze fills the sails. The ships begin moving east, and far above the fading coastline of Ithaca, Athena continues watching the mortal she has quietly chosen, knowing that the greatest test of wisdom has only just begun. The coastline of Ithaca grows smaller with every stroke of the oars until it becomes little more than a dark line resting between sea and sky. Odysseus remains standing at the stern long after the island disappears from sight. Around him, sailors adjust the sails, coil ropes, and speak quietly about favourable winds. Yet his thoughts remain fixed upon the image of Penelope holding Telemachus beneath the rooted olive tree. It is a picture he quietly promises himself never to forget. The sea stretches endlessly ahead. In ancient Greece, voyages were never merely journeys between places. Every crossing carried the possibility of unexpected islands, sudden storms, unfamiliar strangers, or encounters with the divine. Sailors offered prayers before every departure because they understood that once land disappeared beyond the horizon, human plans belonged as much to the gods as to themselves. For several days the voyage remains peaceful. Bright mornings give way to warm afternoons, while dolphins occasionally race beside the ship. Flying seabirds wheel overhead before vanishing toward distant cliffs. At night, the crew navigates by familiar constellations. Odysseus often remains awake after everyone else has fallen asleep, studying the stars that seem almost close enough to touch. One evening, an elderly helmsman points toward the northern sky. The owl constellation is unusually bright. Odysseus looks upward, although later astronomers would give different names to many stars. Sailors often recognize patterns according to local traditions. Whether the old man truly sees an owl or merely wishes to see one cannot be known. Still, Odysseus quietly smiles. Athena seems never very far away. The expedition first reaches Pylos, where the wise King Nestor prepares his own ships. Age has silvered his hair but not diminished his dignity. Among all the Greek rulers, Nestor is respected less for military power than for judgment earned through decades of experience. Young warriors naturally gather around him, eager to hear stories of earlier generations whose names already belong to legend. When Odysseus enters Nestor's hall, the old king rises warmly. "I had hoped wisdom would join us." Odysseus laughs softly. "I thought you already possessed enough for us both." Nestor shakes his head. "Wisdom is never abundant enough when kings travel toward war." The words linger long after the conversation moves elsewhere. That evening, as the assembled leaders share bread, roasted lamb, olives, and dark wine beneath flickering torchlight, discussions drift toward the coming campaign. Some speak confidently of swift victory. Others estimate only a few months before Troy falls. Odysseus says very little. He notices who speaks with certainty. He notices who remain silent. The difference interests him more than the predictions themselves. Athena has taught him that confident voices often understand the least. From Pylos, the growing fleet sails southward and then east, gathering ships from one kingdom after another. Harbours become forests of wooden masts. Bronze armour flashes beneath the Mediterranean sun. Everywhere priests perform sacrifices before departure, asking favourable winds from the gods while reading omens hidden within smoke, birds, and sacrificial flames. The Greek world has never assembled such a force. Hundreds of ships, thousands of warriors, kings whose rivalries have only temporarily been set aside. It is magnificent. It is also fragile. One afternoon, the fleet anchors beside a rocky island while fresh water is gathered from nearby springs. As soldiers rest beneath scattered olive trees, Odysseus walks alone along the shoreline. Waves wash gently over smooth white stones while seabirds cry overhead. There he encounters Calchas, the expedition's most respected seer. The old prophet kneels beside a quiet pool, watching its surface without speaking. "You're searching for answers," Odysseus says. Calchas smiles faintly. "I am searching for question." Odysseus sits beside him. For a while they simply listen to the sea. Finally Calchas speaks. "Prophecy rarely tells us what we wish to know." "What does it tell us?" "Only enough to ensure we keep walking." The answer feels frustrating, yet strangely comforting. Ancient Greeks often viewed prophecy this way. Divine knowledge rarely removed uncertainty. Instead, it forced mortals to confront uncertainty with courage. Complete knowledge belonged only to the gods. As evening approaches, an unusual event unsettles the camp. Without warning, a great eagle circles above the assembled ships carrying a serpent in its talons. The snake twists violently before slipping free and disappearing into the sea below. The eagle cries once before flying inland. Soldiers immediately begin arguing about its meaning. Some declare it promises victory. Others fear it predicts disaster. Calchas studies the empty sky for a long time. "The journey will succeed," he finally says, "but not without suffering." His words spread rapidly through the fleet. Like all good prophecies, they reveal enough to inspire caution while leaving countless possibilities unexplained. Historians continued debating whether such omen stories preserve genuine Bronze Age religious practices or later poetic symbolism. Archaeological discoveries certainly demonstrate how seriously ancient Greeks regarded birds, sacrifices, and unusual natural events. Whether every famous omen occurred exactly as described matters less than the fact that generations genuinely believed such signs connected the mortal world with divine intention. Several days later, the fleet reaches Aulis, where nearly every Greek contingent finally gathers. The sight is breathtaking. Ships stretch across the sheltered bay farther than the eye can easily count. Thousands of tents rise along the shoreline. Horses whinny beside supply wagons. Blacksmiths repair damaged armour, while cooks prepare enormous meals over open fires. The smell of smoke, salt water, roasting meat, leather, pine resin, and hot bronze fills the warm afternoon air. Odysseus walks slowly through the immense camp. Here stands Ajax, practicing with his massive shield. Nearby Diomedes sharpens his spear with patient precision. Young warriors compete in ranskadoi wrestling matches. Experienced veterans quietly inspect their equipment without boasting. Everywhere excitement mixes with hidden anxiety. This gathering represents the greatest concentration of power Greece has ever known. Yet no one truly understands what lies ahead. As night falls, Agamemnon summons the assembled kings. The High King stands before a great fear whose sparks drift upward into the darkness. We are united by oath. No one disagrees. We are united by honour. Again the leaders nod. We will bring Helen home. His words are greeted with determined approval. Yet Odysseus notices something curious. Agamemnon speaks repeatedly about victory. He says almost nothing about peace afterward. The distinction troubles him. Long after the meeting ends, he continues walking alone beside the quiet shoreline. Gentle waves lap against anchored ships whose reflections tremble beneath moonlight. Above the camp, countless stars fill the heavens with silent brilliance. Then he hears footsteps behind him. Nestor approaches. You are thinking again. Odysseus smiles. I seldom stop. Good. The old king looks across the sea. The greatest danger before Troy will not always stand behind its walls. Odysseus understands immediately. The danger is us. Nestor nods. Pride fights beside every army. The conversation ends there. Neither man needs to say more. High above the sleeping camp, clouds slowly gather around the distant peaks overlooking Aulis. The air becomes strangely still. Even the sea seems quieter than before. Some priests begin whispering that Artemis has grown displeased. Others dismiss such fears. No one yet knows that the greatest obstacle preventing the expedition from reaching Troy will not be Trojan soldiers at all. It will come from the gods themselves. As midnight approaches, Odysseus finally returns to his tent before sleeping. He removes his sandals and notices the pale scar across his leg illuminated by the faint glow of an oil lamp. The memory of the boar returns. The owl at Athena's shrine, the rooted bed, Penelope's dream. Every quiet lesson seems to accompany him into the darkness. Outside, the wind suddenly dies completely. Not a single sail moves. The anchored ships rest motionless upon perfectly still water. Experienced sailors awaken one by one, puzzled by the unnatural calm. Far beyond the camp, where moonlight fades into shadow, the sea waits in complete silence. It is the kind of silence ancient Greeks learned to respect, because sometimes the absence of wind is itself the loudest warning the gods can give. Morning arrives over Aulis, yet nothing moves. The sea lies as smooth as polished bronze beneath a pale sky. Hundreds of ships remain exactly where they rested through the night, their sails hanging limp against the masts. Normally, even at sunrise, a gentle breeze would ripple the water or stir the banners flying above the camp. This morning there is only silence. At first, no one worries. Sailors have known calm seas before. A favourable wind will surely return by afternoon. Yet afternoon passes, then evening. The water remains perfectly still. On the second day, uneasiness begins spreading through the enormous camp. Rowing such a vast fleet across the open Aegean, without steady winds, would exhaust the crews long before reaching Troy. Supplies have been carefully measured. Fresh water cannot last forever. Horses require fodder. Thousands of soldiers consume astonishing amounts of grain every day. Even before the first battle has begun, time itself has become an enemy. You walk beside Odysseus as he moves quietly through the camp. Everywhere he hears the same conversations. The wind will come tomorrow. Perhaps Poseidon is displeased. No, this feels different. The priests must know. Rumours tears multiply faster than her. Athena has often taught through observation, and Odysseus notices something important. Fear grows most rapidly wherever knowledge is absent. When people cannot explain silence, they begin filling it with stories. Near the shoreline, fishermen study the sea with puzzled expressions. The birds have changed, one says. Odysseus looks upward. The gulls that usually wheel above the harbour have almost disappeared. Even the smaller seabirds remain hidden among the cliffs. Nature itself seems to be waiting. On the third morning, Agamemnon summons Calchas before the assembled kings. The seer walks slowly into the centre of the gathering, carrying neither staff nor elaborate robes. His face reveals little, yet everyone senses the weight pressing upon him. Agamemnon speaks first. You have read the smoke. Calchas nods. You have watched the birds. Again he nods. Then tell us why Greece cannot sail. For several moments, Calchas says nothing. The silence itself becomes painful. Finally he raises his eyes. It is not Poseidon who restrains her. A murmur passes through the crowd. It is Artemis. Even the breeze seems to hold its breath. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, wild places, and untouched forests, was not easily angered without cause. Ancient traditions preserve several explanations for what happened next. Some claim Agamemnon boasted that his skill exceeded the goddess herself after killing a magnificent stag. Others suggest that a sacred animal belonging to Artemis had been slain without proper reverence. Another interpretation survives in which the offence lay hidden within earlier acts now forgotten by history. Historians continue debating which version came first. The uncertainty itself reminds you how myths often preserve truth through several different paths rather than one fixed memory. Whatever the original cause, Calchas speaks with quiet certainty. The goddess demands a sacrifice. The gathering grows still. What sacrifice? The old prophet closes his eyes briefly before answering. The life of Iphigenia. Agamemnon does not move. His daughter. For a heartbeat. No one believes they've heard correctly. Then the reality settles across the assembly like winter frost. The Greeks understood sacrifice as one of the most sacred acts linking mortals with the divine. Animals were offered regularly during festivals, treaties, and prayers. Human sacrifice, however, belonged to the oldest and darkest traditions, remembered with discomfort even by later generations. Whether such events truly occurred in the Bronze Age remains deeply debated among modern scholars. Many believe stories like this reflected moral questions, rather than historical practice. Yet for those standing at Aulis, philosophy offers little comfort. A father has been asked to choose between his child and an entire expedition. Agamemnon's face hardens. There must be another way. Calchas lowers his head. I have seen none. The meeting ends without decision. Throughout the camp, whispers spread more quickly than fire through dry grass. Some soldiers insist the prophecy cannot be true. Others fear the fleet is already cursed. A few quietly begin wondering whether the war itself should be abandoned. Odysseus listens without adding his own opinion. That evening, he walks beyond the tents toward a low hill overlooking the bay. The sun sinks slowly into crimson clouds while the sea remains unnaturally motionless below. Beside him, Nestor joins the quiet climb. The army grows restless, the old king says. Odysseus nods. They fear uncertainty more than battle. Always, Nestor studies the silent ships. A wise leader does not merely solve problems, he keeps hope alive. The words linger. Odysseus realizes that wisdom requires more than clever ideas. People must believe a tomorrow still exists. As darkness falls, thousands of campfires illuminate the shoreline. From a distance, they resemble scattered stars reflected upon the earth. Music rises from a few tents where soldiers attempt to lift one another's spirits. Yet the songs end sooner than usual. Above the camp, clouds drift slowly across the moon. Then something unexpected happens. An owl lands upon the ridge only a few steps away. It remains perfectly still, watching the sea. Odysseus smiles faintly. You always appear when questions grow heavier. The bird neither moves nor cries. It simply watches. Whether anyone else notices it remains uncertain. Perhaps Athena sends no answers tonight. Only the reminder that she has not abandoned him. The following morning brings no wind. Agamemnon withdraws into his own tent, surrounded by grief impossible for anyone else to carry. Menelaus argues that the expedition cannot fail because of one terrible choice. Other kings avoid speaking openly, unwilling to force a father toward an unbearable decision. The unity of Greece begins showing its first cracks. Odysseus senses another danger quietly emerging. If the leaders divide now, Troy will never even see their ships. Walking through the camp, he pauses beside young warriors practicing with spears despite the uncertainty surrounding them. One boy, scarcely older than Telemachus will someday be, asks an older veteran, "Will we still sail?" The veteran hesitates before answering. "I believe so. Not I know. Only I believe." Sometimes hope survives on words as fragile as those. Later that afternoon, Odysseus visits the shoreline again. The water reflects the clouds with such perfect clarity that sea and sky appear joined into a single, endless surface. He kneels, letting cool water flow across his fingers. Behind him, soft footsteps approach. Calchas, the prophet, stands beside him without speaking. After a long silence, Odysseus asks quietly, "Does prophecy ever leave room for mercy?" Calchas looks toward the distant horizon. Perhaps, the gods reveal destination. He bends to pick up a small white shell. They seldom reveal every road leading there. The answer remains mysterious, yet it plants an important thought. Not every prophecy unfolds exactly as expected. Many ancient temple traditions later emphasize this lesson. Divine messages often contained symbols rather than precise instructions. Human choices still mattered. Fate and free will moved together like two currents beneath the same sea. As sunset colours the western sky, a single gust briefly stirs the surface of the bay. Every sailor looked up. The banners flutter. For one hopeful heartbeat, the camp believes the waiting has ended. Then the breeze disappears. Silence returns. It feels almost cruel. Cruel. Yet Odysseus notices something else. The owl that had watched from the ridge lifts silently into the evening sky and flies eastward, towards Troy, toward the destiny waiting beyond the horizon. He watches until the bird disappears into gathering darkness. The message, if there is one, remains impossible to explain, but deep within himself, he begins to understand something Athena's been teaching all along. Wisdom is not the ability to escape difficult choices. It is the strength to continue walking when no choice remains easy, and before the fleet can even glimpse the walls of Troy. Every leader gathered at Aulis must decide what kind of man he truly is when the gods demand more than courage alone. Another dawn rises over Aulis, and once again the sea remains perfectly still. Mist drifts across the silent harbour, wrapping the anchored fleet in pale grey light until the ships seem almost like ghosts waiting between two worlds. Their tall masts stand motionless against the brightening sky. Thousands of warriors awaken to the same disappointment they carried into sleep. Somewhere beyond the eastern horizon lies Troy, yet it feels farther away now than when they first arrived. The camp grows quieter with each passing day. Arguments still occur, but even anger begins to lose its strength when nothing changes. Blacksmiths continue repairing armour. Stable hands feed restless horses. Priests tend sacred fires that never seem to answer the prayers rising with their smoke. Ordinary routines continue because human beings instinctively cling to familiar work whenever uncertainty becomes too heavy. Odysseus spends these long days walking rather than waiting. He visits the shoreline at sunrise. He speaks with sailors before noon. He listens to young warriors after sunset. Without intending to, he begins becoming the one person able to move comfortably among every part of the enormous camp. Kings trust him because he understands politics. Soldiers respect him because he never speaks down to them. Priests welcome him because he asks sincere questions instead of demanding convenient answers. Athena notices such things. Wisdom rarely announces itself through dramatic victories. More often, it reveals itself through quiet steadiness while others lose patience. One afternoon, Odysseus finds Diomedes sharpening his spear beneath the shade of an old oak tree. The younger warrior works with practiced precision, drawing the whetstone slowly along the bronze edge until it reflects the afternoon sun. "You prepare as though battle begins tomorrow," Odysseus says. Diomedes smiles. "Or next month. You think we will still sail. I think dull weapons never help." Odysseus laughs softly. Simple answers often contain remarkable wisdom. They spend the next hour discussing ships, horses, hunting, and distant kingdoms rather than prophecy. The conversation reminds Odysseus that friendship sometimes grows strongest during periods when nothing important appears to happen. Ancient poets later celebrated mighty battles fought side by side, yet quieter moments like these often created the trust that made those victories possible. As evening approaches, Agamemnon finally emerges from his tent. The change in him is impossible to overlook. Only a few days earlier he carried himself with the confidence expected of the High King of Greece. Now his shoulders seem heavier. Sleepless nights have carved faint shadows beneath his eyes. He summons the assembled rulers once more. This time no great speeches accompany the gathering, only silence. Agamemnon speaks. "I have sent for my daughter." No one answers. The words alone are enough. Some lower their eyes toward the ground. Others stare into the fire burning at the centre of the circle. Even Menelaus, whose honour has brought every king to Aulis, remains silent. The decision feels as unbearable because everyone understands it. Leadership often demands sacrifices. No one expects those sacrifices to begin at home. Some ancient traditions claim that Iphigenia was summoned under the false promise that she would marry Achilles, making her arrival at Aulis joyful rather than fearful. Other versions preserve different details, suggesting she understood little until the final moment. Modern historians remain divided over which tradition developed first. Yet nearly every version agrees on one point. The choice leaves permanent scars upon everyone involved. Odysseus returns to his tent long after the meeting ends. Sleep refuses to come. Instead, he sits outside beneath a sky crowded with stars. The familiar constellations seem unchanged despite the turmoil unfolding below. The same heavens watched over Ithaca. The same stars shone above Penelope and the little Telemachus. Distance suddenly feels far greater than miles. Near midnight, footsteps approach quietly. It is Nestor. Without invitation, the old king sits beside him. For a while they simply watch the stars. Finally Nestor asks, "What troubles you most?" Odysseus answers honestly, "I no longer know whether wisdom can prevent suffering." Nestor considers the question carefully. "When I was young," he says, "I believed wisdom meant finding the perfect path. And now I believe wisdom means choosing the least destructive one." The answer offers little comfort, yet it feels true. Perhaps Athena understands this better than any god. She is not the goddess of perfect worlds. She is the goddess who teaches imperfect people how to endure them. The next morning, unusual excitement spreads through A group of deer appears unexpectedly near the forest's edge. Normally, such timid animals avoid places crowded with thousands of people. Today they stand motionless for several moments before disappearing silently among the trees. Priests immediately begin debating the meaning. One claims Artemis has softened. Another insists the appearance only confirms her presence. Odysseus quietly watches the empty forest after the animals vanish. Nature rarely speaks clearly. Its language requires humility. As the sun climbs higher, ships remain motionless upon the sea. Yet something else begins moving. Relationships. Until now, the Greek kings have thought of themselves primarily as separate rulers gathered for one common purpose. During these long weeks of waiting, they slowly begin learning one another's strengths and weaknesses. Ajax possesses enormous courage but little patience for endless discussion. Diomedes combines youthful confidence with his genuine discipline. Menelaus burns with personal grief that sometimes clouds his judgment. Agamemnon commands naturally yet struggles to admit uncertainty. Nestor calms disputes before they become divisions. And Odysseus listens. He remembers names. He notices who is alone. He observes which commanders inspire loyalty and which demand obedience. Without realizing it, he is studying an army before leading it. Athena could scarcely ask for a better student. Late in the afternoon, dark clouds gather briefly over the surrounding hills. Thunder rumbles once in the distance before fading away. Soldiers look upward hopefully, believing the weather may finally change. Rain falls. Only for a few minutes. The ground becomes cool beneath countless tiny drops. The smell of wet earth rises across the camp. Yet out upon the bay, the sea remains strangely calm. Not a single sail moves. The brief shower feels almost symbolic. Relief comes. Relief departs. Waiting continues. That evening, Calchas quietly approaches Odysseus. "I dreamed last night." The king of Ithaca looks toward him with interest. "What did you see?" "A great olive tree." Odysseus immediately thinks of the rooted tree beside his own chamber. The branches stretched across the sea until they reached the walls of Troy. Calchas pauses. One branch broke. Another silence follows. What happened then? The roots remained. The prophet offers no explanation. Perhaps he cannot. Dreams often arrive incomplete, inviting reflection rather than certainty. Many temple traditions later suggested that divine dreams rarely predicted single events. Instead, they revealed patterns hidden beneath ordinary life. Strength rooted deeply enough could survive even terrible loss. As darkness settles over Aulis once again, Odysseus walks alone beyond the edge of the camp. Crickets sing softly among the grasses, while the scent of pine drifts down from nearby hills. Looking back, he sees thousands of campfires scattered across the shoreline like another constellation fallen to earth. An owl glides silently overhead. It circles once, then disappears toward the sacred grove where Artemis is worshipped. For the briefest moment, Odysseus wonders whether even the gods themselves mourn what must soon happen. No answer comes, only the gentle sound of waves touching the shore. The sea still waits, the fleet still waits, and somewhere beyond the silent horizon, Troy continues living in peaceful ignorance, unaware that every day of delay only brings the greatest war in Greek memory one quiet sunrise closer. The morning arrives wrapped in a pale veil of mist. Dew clings to every rope, every shield, every blade of grass surrounding the immense Greek camp. From a distance, the thousands of ships appear suspended between sea and sky, as though neither earth nor water is willing to claim them. The silence feels heavier than ever before. Even the gulls seem reluctant to cross the motionless bay. You walk beside Odysseus toward the shoreline, where countless sailors once again search the horizon for the smallest sign of wind. During the night, Iphigenia has arrived. No trumpet announces her presence. No celebration greets the daughter of Agamemnon. Only hushed voices pass quietly from tent to tent. Some warriors avoid looking toward the royal camp altogether. Others pray beneath their breath. A few stand watching the eastern sky, hoping that some miracle might still prevent what prophecy appears to demand. Ancient traditions preserve several endings to this painful story. In one, Artemis accepts the sacrifice. In another, the goddess replaces Iphigenia with a sacred deer at the final moment and carries the young woman away to serve forever in a distant sanctuary. Greek dramatists themselves preserve different versions, perhaps because they struggled with the same question listeners have asked for centuries. Could divine justice truly require such a price? No surviving tradition completely settles the matter. Odysseus remains near the edge of the gathering. He neither speaks nor judges. Some burdens belong only to those forced to carry them. As the priests complete their solemn rites, an extraordinary stillness settles across Aulis. The smoke from the altar, which for days has risen almost straight into the air, suddenly bends toward the open sea. One sailor notices first, then another. A loose banner begins to flutter. The smallest ripple appears upon the surface of the bay. Someone whispers. The wind. Within moments, the motionless harbour awaken. Gentle waves spread outward across the anchored fleet. Linen sails tremble softly against wooden masts. The smell of salt water grows sharper as the fresh breeze gathers strength. A murmur sweeps across thousands of waiting soldiers. Relief, gratitude, sorrow, hope. Every emotion seems to arouse. Together, the fleet can finally sail, yet the price of that wind, whatever truly occurred upon the sacred hill, will never be forgotten. Odysseus stands watching the growing waves. Instead of triumph, he feels a deep sadness settle quietly inside him. Victory has not yet begun, and already every king understands that the road to Troy will demand far more than courage. Athena, perhaps, has been teaching another lesson. Wisdom cannot erase tragedy. It can only prevent tragedy from becoming meaningless. The camp explodes into movement. Sailors rush towards their vessels. Bronze helmets are secured. Spears are stacked carefully inside the ships. Horses are guided aboard specially prepared transports while servants load grain. Water jars, dried fish, olive oil, wine, and bundles of firewood. Everywhere the sound of shouted orders blends with hammer blows, creaking timber, and snapping ropes. You follow Odysseus through the organised chaos. Unlike many commanders, he never raises his voice unnecessarily. He checks every supply. He speaks personally with his helmsman. He ensures every member of his crew has eaten before departure. Small decisions, quiet decisions, exactly the sort Athena values. As his ship prepares to leave the shore, an old sailor approaches carrying a weathered wooden carving of an owl, no larger than a man's hand. "My father carried this," the sailor says. "He believed the grey-eyed goddess watched every voyage." He offers it to Odysseus. "I think you should have it now." Odysseus hesitates. "It belongs to your family." The old sailor smiles. "Today, my family sails with you." Odysseus accepts the little carving with both hands. Whether chance or quiet destiny arranged the meeting, no one can truly know. He places the owl carefully beside the steering position where it will face the open sea. Historians occasionally point towards discoveries of small protective figurines aboard ancient Mediterranean ships, suggesting sailors often carried sacred symbols during dangerous voyages. Whether this particular story reflects historical custom or later imagination remains uncertain. Yet it beautifully expresses how closely religion accompanied daily life in the ancient world. By midday, the fleet begins leaving Aulis. One ship, then another. Soon hundreds of vessels spread across the bright water like an enormous flock of white-winged birds. Fresh wind fills every sail. Oars rise together before being pulled smoothly through the sea. The synchronized rhythm echoes across the bay until even the cliffs seem to answer. Standing upon the deck, Odysseus watches the shoreline slowly disappear behind them. No one cheers. The moment feels too solemn. Every man aboard understands that many of those sailing today will never again see Greece. Toward evening, the coastline becomes a distant shadow. The open Aegean stretches endlessly around the fleet. Waves strike gently against the hull, while flying fish leap briefly through golden sunlight before vanishing beneath the water again. Dolphins appear near the lead ships, racing effortlessly through the surf. Several sailors smile. "Dolphins bring good fortune." Another replies, "Only if we deserve it." The conversation ends with quiet laughter. Hope returns in small ways. After sunset, Agamemnon orders signal fires lit aboard the larger vessels. Tiny flames shimmer across the dark sea until the fleet resembles another constellation floating upon the water. Above, the real stars emerge one by one. Odysseus remains awake. He studies the sky just as he did while sailing home from Sparta years before. The same stars, a different man. He thinks of Penelope, of Telemachus, of the rooted olive tree. For the first time since leaving Ithaca, he quietly removes the small owl carving from beside the helm and holds it in his hands. "I hope wisdom is enough," he whispers. The wind answers by filling the sail more strongly. Whether Athena hears him cannot be known. Yet another sign quietly follows. An owl appears, far from land. It glides silently above the fleet before disappearing into the darkness ahead. Sailors stare upward in astonishment. Some insist no owl could possibly fly so far across open water. Others simply bow their head. Ancient storytellers treasured moments exactly like this because they stood upon the boundary between natural explanation and divine mystery. Perhaps the bird had rested unseen aboard one of the ships before taking flight. Perhaps another explanation existed entirely. Or perhaps Athena wished to remind one weary king that he did not sail alone. Near midnight, clouds briefly cover the moon. The sea grows darker. Only the distant signal fires reveal the fleet's immense size. Calchas walks quietly across the deck until he stands beside Odysseus. I dreamed again. Odysseus looks toward him. What did you see this time? A city of shining Incas towers. Troy, the old prophet nods. I also saw an owl perched above its highest gate. He pauses. It was waiting. For whom? Calchas slowly turns toward the eastern horizon. I could not tell. The answer leaves another question lingering in the cool night air. Was Athena already watching Troy? Was she waiting for Odysseus? Or had destiny itself reached the city long before the first Greek sail appeared upon the horizon? The fleet continues eastward beneath countless stars, carried at last by the wind that had been purchased at such terrible cost. Ahead lies the greatest city of the age. Ahead lie heroes whose names will outlive kingdoms. Ahead lies friendship, betrayal, sacrifice, and glory. And somewhere beyond the darkness, hidden beyond the curve of the sea, Athena quietly waits for the moment when the king of Ithaca will need not merely cleverness, but every lesson she has spent an entire lifetime teaching him. Several peaceful days pass upon the open sea. The fleet settles into a steady rhythm that almost resembles ordinary life. At dawn, sailors lower buckets into the cool water before washing the salt from their faces. Bread is shared while the first sunlight spreads across countless sails. Throughout the afternoon, ships maintain careful distance from one another, each captain reading the winds while watching the movements of neighbouring vessels. At night, songs rise softly from different decks, carried across the water until they blend with the endless sound of gentle waves. You begin to understand why ancient Greeks respected the sea with such devotion. It never remains entirely friend or enemy. One morning it offers smooth passage beneath bright skies. By evening it surrounds every ship with mist so thick that even nearby vessels become little more than distant shadows. Every successful voyage depends upon humility as much as skill. Odysseus spends most of his time walking the length of his ship. He speaks with rowers whose hands have become rough from the oars. He listens to young sailors describing wives and children waiting at home. He asks experienced navigators about unfamiliar currents and changing winds. One of the oldest crewmen smiles. A king who asks questions keeps better sailors, Odysseus answers quietly. A sailor who answers honestly keeps a better king. The men laugh gently. Trust grows through conversations like these rather than through commands shouted across the deck. One evening, as sunset turns the western sky deep crimson, Diomedes' ship draws closer near for the two commanders to speak across the water. You still think more than you celebrate, Diomedes calls. There will be time enough for a celebration after we return home. If we return. Odysseus nods. If. The younger warrior studies him for a moment. You truly believe this would be a short campaign? I wanted to. The wind carries away the final words before either man speaks again. Several days later, the weather changes. Low grey clouds drift across the eastern horizon while a cool breeze freshens steadily. The fleet continues onward without difficulty, yet experienced sailors begin watching the sky more carefully. During the night, rain falls softly across the ships. It is not a violent storm, only a patient rain that washes salt from the decks and cools the warm timber. The smell of wet wood mixes with the scent of olive oil burning inside sheltered lanterns. Wrapped in his cloak beneath the stern canopy, Odysseus remains awake listening to thousands of tiny drops striking sailcloth. Sleep finally comes just before dawn. With it arrives an unusual dream. He stands alone within an endless olive grove. Every tree appears ancient, beyond measure. Silver leaves shimmer although no wind blows. Lows. Far ahead stands a woman wearing a simple grey robe. She neither approaches nor retreats. Her face remains hidden beneath shifting branches. She raises one hand. An owl lands upon her wrist. Then both woman and bird slowly fade into morning mist. Odysseus awakens immediately. The dream leaves behind no fear, only quiet certainty. Ancient Greeks often believed that dreams arriving near dawn deserved special attention, because the boundary between mortal sleep and divine influence seemed thinner during those final moments before sunrise. Another interpretation preserved by later philosophers suggested that such dreams revealed truths already growing within the dreamer's own heart. Which explanation is correct remains impossible to know. Perhaps both. Kaboom! As the sun climbs above the sea, the lookout suddenly shouts from the mast, "Land!" Every conversation stops. Men hurry toward the rails. Far ahead, rising faintly through the morning haze, stretches the coastline of Asia Minor. The long voyage is ending. The greater journey is about to begin. Throughout the fleet, excitement spreads quickly. Sailors tighten ropes. Commanders study the shoreline through narrowed eyes. Priests quietly offer brief prayers over small bronze altars secured upon the larger ships. Then another cry comes from the mast. The towers, at first they appear almost unreal, tiny pale shapes resting above distant cliffs. Gradually they grow clearer. Massive walls, high gates, great towers catching the morning sunlight. Troy. Even from many miles away, the city inspires wonder. Built upon rising ground overlooking fertile plains and nearby rivers, it dominates the surrounding landscape with remarkable confidence. Archaeological discoveries at Hisarlik continue suggesting that several prosperous cities once stood upon this hill over many centuries. Which layer most closely resembles Homer's Troy remains debated, yet the image preserved by ancient poetry continues to capture the imagination. Standing beside Odysseus, you understand why. This is no ordinary fortress. It appears almost timeless. Its stone walls glow softly beneath the morning sun while distant fields stretch outward in every direction. Behind the city rise wooded hills fading into blue mountains. The nearby sea sparkles peacefully as though unaware that history is approaching upon hundreds of sails. No one aboard speaks for several moments. Even seasoned warriors simply watch. Finally, Nestor's flagship signals the fleet to slow. The assembled kings gather aboard Agamemnon's vessel for their first council within sight of Troy. Maps carved upon wax tablets are spread across a heavy wooden table. Scouts describe beaches suitable for landing. Experienced captains debate tides and currents. Agamemnon speaks confidently of surrounding the city before its defenders can fully prepare. Odysseus listens. Then he quietly asks, "What do we know of the people behind those walls?" The question surprises several commanders. Agamemnon answers, "They are our enemy." Odysseus gently shakes his head. "They are also fathers." Silence follows. "Mothers!" He points toward the distant city. "Children, merchants, craftsmen, farmers. If we understand only their walls, we understand very little." Nestor smiles almost imperceptibly. Athena would have approved. Wisdom begins by recognizing another person's humanity, even across the battlefield. The meeting ends with plans for a careful landing the following morning. As evening approaches, the fleet anchors beyond the range of Trojan lookouts. Fires are forbidden. Voices remain low. Hundreds of ships drift quietly beneath the gathering stars. From the distant city, tiny lights appear one after another. Families prepare evening meals. Temple lamps glow before sacred images. Dogs bark somewhere beyond the walls. Life continues peacefully inside Troy. They know Greek ships have been reported. They cannot yet imagine the years awaiting them. Odysseus stands alone at the bow long after darkness settles across the sea. The owl carving rests comfortably in his hand. Far away upon the highest tower of Troy, a single torch suddenly burns brighter than the others before slowly dimming again. Coincidence or signal? No one aboard can tell. Calchas quietly approaches. The dream returned. Odysseus turns. "What did you see?" "The owl." "And It was no longer waiting. The prophet looks toward the silent city. It had already entered. Whether the words describe Athena's unseen presence, destiny crossing Troy's gates, or merely another mystery left for future generations to ponder, neither man attempts to decide. The night remains wonderfully calm. The stars shine above both Greeks and Trojans alike. The same cool wind touches every sleeping child within the city and every waiting soldier upon the sea. Tomorrow they will become enemies. Tonight they still share the same peaceful sky, and somewhere beyond human sight. The grey-eyed goddess continues watching, knowing that the true reason she chose Odysseus will soon be tested not through clever words alone, but through the impossible choices that every long war eventually demands. The final night before the landing passes slowly. Very few aboard the Greek ships sleep deeply. Some warriors quietly sharpen spearheads that are already sharp enough. Others polish bronze helmets until they catch the faint light of the stars. A few simply sit along the rails, watching the distant silhouette of Troy resting peacefully upon its hill. The city appears almost beautiful beneath the moon, its towers glowing softly while scattered temple fires flicker like tiny stars brought down to earth. You remain beside Odysseus as dawn gradually approaches. The eastern sky changes from black to deep violet, then pale silver. Finally, the first golden light touches the higher stones of Troy. The city awakens. Thin columns of smoke begin rising from household hearths. Farmers guide animals toward nearby fields beyond the walls. Fishermen push small boats into the calm waters of the coast. From this distance, everything appears ordinary, almost comforting. For a brief moment, it becomes difficult to believe that thousands of armed men have crossed the sea to challenge this peaceful morning. Ancient poets often pause before great battles to describe quiet scenes exactly like these. They understood that war feels most tragic when contrasted with the simple beauty of ordinary life. Across the Greek fleet, signal horns sound softly. The landing begins. Hundreds of ships raise their sails together. Oars dip into the sea with remarkable discipline. The enormous armada moves toward the shore like a single living creature, carried upon the steady morning wind. Odysseus stands near the helm, his eyes never leaving the coastline ahead. Around him, his crew works without panic. Years of sailing together have created silent understanding. One sailor adjusts the steering oar before being asked. Another secures spare spears. A third quietly checks every shield stacked along the deck. Preparation replaces fear. The shoreline grows steadily closer. Now individual trees become visible. Rocky beaches, low dunes, small streams flowing into the sea and farther inland. The immense walls of Troy rising with quiet confidence above the surrounding plain. Suddenly another ship draws alongside. Diomedes stands at its bow. "Come, he smiles faintly. "We have finally arrived." Odysseus returns the smile. "We have." Neither man speaks of victory. Neither mentions glory. Both understand that beginnings require no celebration, only attention. As the fleet nears the beach, Calchas raises one hand from Agamemnon's flagship. The signal spreads quickly. Slow the advance. A sacrifice must be offered before the first warrior steps onto Trojan soil. The ships drift quietly upon gentle waves while priests prepare small portable altars aboard the leading vessels. Wine darkens polished bronze bowls. Fresh barley scatters across the sacred flames. Prayers rise into the cool morning air, carried toward Olympus by the same wind that has finally brought the Greeks safely across the sea. Odysseus closes his eyes during the prayer. He does not ask for victory. He asks only for wisdom. The request surprises even himself. Perhaps Athena has already changed him more deeply than he realizes. As the ceremony concludes, something remarkable happens. A bright hawk appears high above the fleet. It circles once, twice. Then suddenly an owl emerges from the coastal trees below, climbing into the morning sky until both birds briefly share the same air before disappearing in opposite directions. Several priests exchange thoughtful glances. A hawk often belongs to kings. An owl belongs to Athena. Two paths. Two kinds of power. Calchas quietly murmurs, "May they remain friends." No one asks what he means. The prophecy, like so many before it, offers more mystery than certainty. Historians continue debating how frequently birds shaped military decisions during the late Bronze Age. Archaeological evidence suggests that divination through birds remained widespread for centuries, while epic poetry transformed such observations into unforgettable symbolic moments. Whether this particular omen belongs to memory or metaphor, it perfectly captures the Greek belief that nature constantly reflected divine intention. The signal finally comes. Advance. The ships surge forward. Waves break gently beneath their bows as the first keels scrape against the sandy shore. Sailors leap into shallow water, pulling vessels farther onto land while heavily armed warriors prepare to disembark. According to one famous tradition, an old prophecy declared that the first Greek to set foot upon Trojan soil would also become the first to die. The story spreads rapidly among the leading ships. Suddenly no one wishes to move first, not because the warriors lack courage, because prophecy has transformed a single step into destiny. For several heartbeats, the entire invasion hesitates. Thousands of men, hundreds of ships, an entire war waiting upon one uncertain moment. Odysseus watches carefully. He notices fear spreading silently despite every helmet hiding it. Then another figure acts. Protesilaus, without boasting, without speech, he leaps ashore. His sandals strike the wet sand. The invasion begins. The first Greek hero runs toward the waiting Trojans. Ancient tradition remembers him with quiet sadness. For the prophecy soon proves true. Before long, Protesilaus falls beneath Trojan weapons, becoming the first Greek casualty of the long war. Later generations honoured him not because he survived, but because he willingly accepted the burden no one else wished to carry. Odysseus pauses only briefly before following his men onto the beach. The sand feels strangely soft beneath his feet after so many days aboard ship. The scent of salt mixes with trampled grass and disturbed earth. Ahead, Trojan defenders begin forming lines beyond the dunes. Their armour flashes beneath the brightening sun. For the first time, Greeks and Trojans see one another face to face, not as stories, not as rumours, as ordinary human beings. Some appear scarcely older than boys, others already carry grey hair beneath polished helmets. Every one of them has a family waiting behind the walls. The realization settles quietly inside Odysseus. Athena's lessons return again. Understand before acting. Observe before judging. Think before striking. Around him, the noise of war gradually awakens. Bronze strikes bronze. Commands echo across the shoreline. Shields lock together. Yet beneath the growing chaos, Odysseus remains unusually calm. His mind moves faster than his heartbeat. He notices the slope of the land, the direction of the wind, the position of the Trojan archers, the narrow stream crossing part of the battlefield. While others focus only upon enemies directly ahead, he quietly studies the entire field. This is what Athena has been preparing him for since childhood. Not merely battle, perspective. As the first clash begins farther down the beach, Agamemnon's commanders start organizing defensive positions around the newly landed ships. Supplies must be unloaded, horses brought safely ashore, camp boundaries established before nightfall. The war will not end today. Everyone understands that now. Near sunset, after hours of scattered fighting, both armies gradually withdraw. Neither side has won, neither side has been broken. The Greeks secure their beachhead. The Trojans return behind their towering walls. The first day closes without decisive victory, only with understanding. This war will demand patience beyond anything imagined. As darkness falls, countless fires begin glowing across the Greek camp while matching lights appear upon the walls of Troy. Two worlds now face one another across a narrow stretch of open ground. Between them lies destiny. Odysseus climbs a small rise overlooking both camps. The little owl carving remains tucked safely beneath his cloak. Above him, the evening sky slowly fills with stars. An owl flies silently from the direction of the Trojan hills and disappears toward the Greek camp, whether it seeks food, shelter, or carries the quiet gaze of Athena herself. No mortal can truly know. No, yet Odysseus watches until it vanishes into the darkness, sensing more clearly than ever before that the goddess has not chosen him simply to survive this war. She has chosen him because long before Troy finally falls, the greatest battles will be fought inside the minds of those trying to remain wise while surrounded by endless violence. The first weeks before Troy pass more quietly than later generations often imagine. Songs and paintings usually remember blazing battles, charging heroes, and glittering duels beneath the walls, yet war rarely begins with constant violence. Much of it is waiting for scouts to return, waiting for supplies, waiting for weather, waiting for kings to agree upon plans that satisfy men who have spent their entire lives giving orders rather than receiving them. You soon discover that the greatest challenge facing the Greeks is not Troy itself, it is remaining united. Each kingdom has brought its own customs, commanders, ambitions, and expectations. Ajax commands warriors who admire direct action. Diomedes favours disciplined movement and careful preparation. Nestor constantly urges patience. Agamemnon believes the authority of the High King should settle every disagreement before it begins. Odysseus watches. He rarely speaks first. Athena has taught him that understanding grows strongest in silence. The Greek camp slowly transforms from a temporary landing place into a living city. Long rows of tents stretch across the plain beside the sea. Defensive ditches are dug around the outer edge. Blacksmiths build rough forges from local stone, where glowing bronze is reshaped beneath ringing hammers from dawn until well after sunset. Bakers grind grain into flour while fishermen venture cautiously along the coast before sunrise, always under the protection of armed companions. The smell of smoke never entirely leaves the camp. Wood fires, cooking meat, hot bronze, burning pine resin, salt carried inland by the sea breeze. Together they create the scent of a world preparing itself for a long struggle. Odysseus walks through the camp every morning before the sun grows hot. Soldiers greet him naturally now. They no longer see only a distant king from a western island. They see someone willing to stop beside an ordinary fire and ask whether food has arrived on time, whether shields need repairing, whether anyone has fallen ill. Leadership, he quietly discovers, grows through countless small acts invisible to history. One afternoon, while returning from the shoreline, he notices two young warriors arguing over a damaged spear. Voices rise, hands tighten around weapons. Before anyone else intervenes, Odysseus steps calmly between them. He examines the cracked shaft, then smiles. The spear is already chosen. Both men look confused. It broke because neither of you should carry it into battle. He hands each of them a different weapon from the nearby supply rack. The quarrel disappears almost instantly. One soldier laughs. The other shakes his head. So simple, Odysseus answers. Most lasting solutions are. Several nearby veterans quietly nod. Athena never admired unnecessary conflict. She admired those capable of ending it. Beyond the Greek defences, life inside Troy continues as well. Scouts report that markets remain open each morning. Farmers still work nearby fields under the protection of mounted patrols. Children can occasionally be seen playing upon the walls before being hurried indoors whenever Greek patrols approach too closely. These reports surprise many younger warriors. They behave as though no war has begun, Nestor replies gently, because for them it has only begun. The distinction matters. Ancient cities could not survive by thinking only of battle. Bread still had to be baked, wells still cleaned, temples still tended. Ordinary life became an act of quiet resistance. Some historians believe archaeological discoveries around ancient Troy support this gradual beginning better than the dramatic assaults described in later poetry. Sieges often lasted for years, interrupted by raids, negotiations, harvests, and shifting alliances rather than constant fighting. Another interpretation suggests Homer compressed many separate events into a more concentrated narrative. The truth remains uncertain, yet both possibilities remind you that real endurance often appears less dramatic than legend. One evening, Agamemnon summons the kings. Inside the large command tent, maps drawn upon stretched leather cover a heavy wooden table. Small carved stones represent Greek forces. Wooden markers indicate rivers, hills, forests, and the towering walls of Troy. Agamemnon points toward the city. "We attack." Ajax immediately agrees. "Every day we wait strengthens them." Nestor slowly shakes his head. "Every careless assault weakens us." The discussion grows louder. Different commanders speak over one another. Some demand immediate action. Others urge patience. Odysseus remains silent until Agamemnon finally turns toward him. And Ithaca. He studies the map for a long moment. What feeds Troy? The question surprises everyone. Agamemnon frowns. The city. No? Odysseus gently traces a finger across the surrounding countryside. The farms, the rivers, the roads, the nearby allied towns. If we understand how Troy lives, we understand how Troy survives. Silence slowly returns. Instead of attacking the strongest walls in Greece, he suggests weakening the network supporting them. Athena's wisdom appears again, not striking the obvious target, seeing the hidden one. The plan is accepted. Over the following months, Greek expeditions begin sailing along nearby coasts, capturing supply towns allied with Troy, securing provisions for their own army while limiting resources reaching the city. The war changes. It becomes slower, wider, far more complicated. Odysseus proves remarkably successful during these operations. Rather than destroying settlements unnecessarily, he often accepts peaceful surrender in exchange for fair treatment. Some communities even begin cooperating willingly once they realize Greek commanders do not all behave alike. Reputation, he learns, can become another weapon. Late one afternoon, after returning from a successful expedition, Odysseus climbs alone to a rocky hill overlooking both the sea and the distant walls of Troy. A cool breeze moves through scattered cypress trees. The air smells of dry grass warmed by the declining sun. Far below, waves break softly against the shore where hundreds of Greek ships remain safely drawn onto the beach. He removes the small owl carving from beneath his cloak. Its wooden surface has become smooth from constant handling. "You remain silent," he says quietly. The wind stirs the nearby branches. Then, almost as though answering, an owl glides from one tree to another before settling upon a weathered stone. It watches him. He smiles. "I suppose wisdom rarely needs many words." The bird blinks once, then flies towards Troy. Again, always towards Troy. The pattern no longer feels accidental. That night, Odysseus experiences another dream. He walks through an immense marble temple unlike any he's ever seen. Hundreds of polished columns disappear into darkness above. Oil lamps burn without smoke. Somewhere ahead, footsteps echo softly across smooth stone. He follows. At the center of the temple grows a single olive tree, whose branches reach upward through an opening in the roof toward countless stars. Beneath the tree stands Athena. For the first time, he sees her and clearly. She wears no jeweled horse and a jeweled crown, no extravagant robes, only simple armor shining with quiet silver light. Her expression is calm, almost sorrowful. She says only one sentence. "A city is easiest to conquer after you understand its heart." Then the dream dissolves. Odysseus awakens before dawn. The words remain vivid. Whether the goddess truly spoke or his own mind finally gathered years of quiet lessons into one unforgettable image, no one can know. Ancient temple traditions often encouraged exactly this uncertainty. Divine wisdom was believed to work through dreams, memory, observation, and reflection together rather than separately. As the first light touches the camp, scouts arrive with important news. A Trojan prince has been seen leading patrols beyond the walls. His name is Hector. Even among enemies, stories of his courage have already begun spreading. Odysseus listens carefully. Another, she's remarkable. The mine, another devoted husband, another father. Athena has guided him toward a war where his greatest opponent may also become one of the men he most deeply respects. And somewhere beyond the towering walls, unseen by either army, destiny quietly prepares the meeting that will shape the rest of the Trojan War. As summer slowly settles over the plains before Troy, the rhythm of the war changes again. The first excitement of the campaign fades into patient endurance. Dust rises each afternoon beneath the feet of marching soldiers before drifting across the camp in thin golden clouds. Wells become gathering places where men exchange news while filling heavy clay jars. Armour grows warm beneath the relentless sun, and every evening the cool sea breeze feels like an unexpected gift from the gods. Months have now become years. No one speaks of returning home before autumn or winter. The war has begun stretching beyond the expectations of every king who first sailed from Greece. Odysseus notices the change most clearly in the faces around him. Young warriors who once dreamed eagerly of glory now speak more often of vineyards, families, and familiar harbours. Veterans repair sandals with remarkable care because every useful possession has become precious. Even laughter sounds quieter than before. War, he realises, does not merely consume lives, it slowly reshapes the living. Athena seems to have understood this from the beginning. One morning, scouts arrive carrying important news. Hector himself has been leading increasingly bold patrols beyond the safety of Troy's walls. Rather than remaining hidden behind the city's mighty defences, the Trojan prince rides daily among his soldiers, inspecting farms, encouraging villagers, and personally organising the protection of supply routes. Agamemnon studies the reports. He grows confident. Nestor gently shakes his head. No, he grows responsible. The distinction matters. Odysseus asks every scout the same question. What kind of man is he? The answers remain remarkably consistent. He eats with ordinary soldiers. He walks instead of riding whenever others are tired. He speaks calmly. He is never the last to arrive. He is never the first to leave. These details interest Odysseus far more than descriptions of Hector's strength. Leadership leaves patterns. Good leaders often resemble one another, even when standing on opposite sides of a battlefield. That afternoon, Odysseus rides with a small reconnaissance party across the rolling countryside. Dry grass bends beneath the warm wind while cicadas fill the air with their endless song. Vineyards stretch toward distant hills where scattered farmhouses stand beneath groves of olive and fig trees. Everything feels almost peaceful, until you remember that somewhere nearby, another patrol is likely moving with exactly the same caution. Near sunset, the Greeks climb a low ridge overlooking a narrow valley. Below them, Trojan riders appear. Only a handful, perhaps 8. Their leader immediately draws attention. Tall, broad-shouldered. His bronze armour reflects the declining sun without excessive ornament. A dark horse carries him steadily through the valley while the men around him seem naturally to follow his pace. "Hector," whispers one scout. The distance remains too great for battle. Too great even for conversation. Yet Odysseus continues watching. He notices Hector pause beside an elderly shepherd struggling to lift a broken cartwheel, without hesitation. The Trojan prince dismounts, helps repair the axle, speaks briefly with the old man, then continues his patrol. No audience applauds. No poet records the moment. It simply happens. Odysseus quietly submisses. Athena has brought him face to face with another ruler who understands that greatness often hides within ordinary kindness. The Greeks withdraw before being discovered. No arrows are exchanged. No blood is spilled. Yet the encounter lingers in Odysseus' thoughts long after returning to camp. That evening, Diomedes notices his unusual silence. "You have seen Hector." Odysseus nods. "What did you think?" He hesitates. "I think Troy's fortunate." Diomedes studies him carefully. "You admire him. I understand him. There is a difference." Ancient Greek audiences often appreciated these moments because they reminded listeners that heroism did not belong exclusively to one side. Hector became beloved precisely because even his enemies recognized his dignity. Modern scholars frequently point to this balanced portrayal as one reason the Iliad continues feeling remarkably human despite its mythological setting. Several nights later, an unusual dream visits Odysseus. He stands upon the walls of Troy, yet no soldiers surround him. The city lies completely silent. Temple doors stand open. Marketplaces remain empty. Only the sound of wind moves through deserted streets. Ahead stands Hector, not wearing armour, only simple clothing. The Trojan prince says quietly, "We both guard homes, nothing more." The dream ends. Odysseus awakens before sunrise with the strange feeling that he has spoken with a friend rather than an enemy. He tells no one. Dreams belong first to the dreamer. Outside his tent, dawn arrives cool and fragrant after light rain during the night. The smell of wet earth rises from the plain while distant birds greet the coming day. He walks alone toward the shoreline where gentle waves erase yesterday's footprints one by one. There he finds the old sailor who first gave him the wooden owl. The man sits repairing a fishing net despite being hundreds of miles from home. "You still mend nets?" Odysseus asks. The sailor laughs softly. "A torn net remains torn whether you stand in Ithaca or Troy." He pauses. "So does a neglected friendship." Simple wisdom again. Athena often speaks most clearly through ordinary people. Later that afternoon, messengers arrive from neighbouring kingdoms recently brought under Greek control. Grain has been secured. Additional livestock will soon reach the camp. The gradual strategy Odysseus proposed months earlier continues strengthening the Greek position while slowly limiting Troy's resources. Agamemnon publicly praises the success. Many commanders now look toward the king of Ithaca whenever difficult decisions arise. Influence has begun replacing reputation. Athena could scarcely have arranged a better lesson. Authority gained through respect lasts longer than authority demanded through rank. As evening falls, priests gather for another sacrifice seeking guidance from the gods. The smoke rises straight upward before unexpectedly twisting into the shape of a branching tree. Several worshippers immediately notice. Calchas watches silently. Finally he says, "The roots grow stronger." Someone asks, "Whose roots?" The prophet only smiles. Time will answer. Like every memorable prophecy, it reveals almost nothing while refusing to leave the mind. After night has fully settled across the plain, Odysseus climbs once again to the familiar hill overlooking both camps. Greek fires glow behind him. Trojan fires shine before him. Between them stretches quiet darkness filled only with crickets and cool night air. The little owl carving rests comfortably in his palm. High above, an actual owl glides silently across the open ground separating the two armies. It does not choose a side. It flies from one camp to the other as though borders mean nothing to wisdom. Odysseus watches until it disappears beyond Troy's walls. Perhaps Athena is reminding him of something essential. Truth does not always belong entirely to friends. Honour does not disappear simply because another banner flies above it. And before this long war finally reaches its terrible conclusion, he will need to remember that the noblest lessons sometimes come from those standing across the battlefield rather than beside him. Years pass almost unnoticed. Seasons circle one another with quiet certainty, while the war settles into a pattern neither side could have imagined when the first ships touched the beaches beneath Troy. Spring covers the surrounding hills with wildflowers only to surrender them to the dry heat of summer. Autumn paints the vineyards with deep gold before winter rains soften the dusty plain once more. The walls of Troy remain standing. The Greek camp grows larger, stronger, and strangely more permanent, as though an entire wandering city has rooted itself beside the sea. You begin to understand why ancient wars exhausted even the greatest kingdoms. Victory is rarely delivered by a single heroic charge. More often it belongs to those who continue enduring after everyone expected the struggle to end. Odysseus changes with the passing years. The youthful confidence that once accompanied every clever solution becomes quieter. His beard grows longer. Fine lines begin appearing around his eyes from endless days spent studying maps, reading faces, and watching distant walls. Yet something else grows stronger. Patience. Athena has always valued patience. Every morning before sunrise, while much of the camp still sleeps, Odysseus walks alone along the shoreline. Waves wash gently across the sand before retreating with their endless whisper. Gulls drift overhead. The air smells of salt, seaweed, and damp earth. These quiet walks become a kind of prayer without words. He listens more than he speaks. One dawn he discovers Achilles standing alone beside the water. The younger hero stares toward the horizon with folded arms. Neither man speaks immediately. Eventually Achilles says, "I did not imagine glory would take you deeply and beholden to make you so long." Odysseus smiles faintly. Glory rarely tells you how much waiting it requires. Achilles throws a small stone into the sea. I grow tired of waiting. You grow dangerous. Achilles turns toward him. There is a difference. Odysseus nods. A tired man seeks rest. A dangerous man seeks someone to blame. The words linger between them. Achilles says nothing more. Yet as the two men part, he nods once in quiet acknowledgement. Athena understands tempers better than swords. Sometimes one careful sentence prevents a battle that history never records. The Greek camp continues expanding. Workshops now produce arrows, shields, and wagon wheels almost daily. Physicians gather herbs from nearby hillsides. Merchants from friendly islands occasionally arrive under guarded escort, exchanging wine, cloth, and bronze for livestock captured during earlier campaigns. War has become routine. That realization troubles Odysseus more than any battle. Human beings, he realizes, possess an extraordinary ability to adapt, even to sorrow, especially to sorrow. One afternoon, a dispute erupts between two allied commanders over captured supplies. Voices rise until armed retainers begin gathering behind each side. Hands rest upon sword hilts. The argument spreads quickly through the camp. Odysseus arrives before violence begins. He asks neither commander who is right. Instead, he asks one question. If Troy watches us today, what lesson do you wish them to learn? Silence follows. Slowly the anger fades. One commander lowers his eye. The other quietly steps back. The supplies are divided without another word. Afterward, Nestor smiles. You have become very much like her. Odysseus understands immediately. Athena. Not because he possesses divine wisdom, because he has finally begun asking the questions she would ask. Ancient philosophers later argued that wisdom often reveals itself not through answers, but through better questions. Whether Homer himself intended this interpretation remains uncertain, yet the tradition fits Odysseus remarkably well. He succeeds less by knowing everything than by guiding others toward discovering truth themselves. As another summer approaches, unusual reports begin arriving from Trojan territory. Food has become more carefully rationed. Harvests require stronger military escorts. Some nearby allies hesitate before sending additional support. The gradual strategy first proposed years earlier is beginning to reshape the balance of the war. Not dramatically, quietly, like water slowly wearing away the stone. Athena's preferred victories often arrive exactly this way. One evening, Calchas visits Odysseus carrying an old olive branch gathered from a nearby grove. It reminded me of your dreams. He lays the branch upon the table. The leaves are green. The wood inside is older. He carefully breaks one small twig. Fresh pale fibres appear beneath the bark. Strength hidden beneath age. Odysseus turns the branch thoughtfully between his hands. The tree survives because its roots remain alive. Calchas smiles, as do wise men. The conversation ends there. Neither wishes to explain the symbolism further. Some truths lose power when explained too completely. That night another dream comes. Odysseus finds himself standing once again inside the vast marble temple. The olive tree remains at its centre. Athena waits beneath its branches. This time she holds neither spear nor shield, only a simple loom. She begins weaving. Golden thread crosses grey thread. Dark thread crosses bright. The pattern appears meaningless at first, then gradually aces and image forms. Not a battle, not a victory. A home, an olive tree, a father embracing a grown son. Before Odysseus can speak, Athena looks toward him. Wisdom does not exist to win wars. Her voice remains calm. It exists to preserve what survives them. The dream dissolves. He awakens before dawn with tears quietly resting at the corners of his eyes. Not from sadness, from longing. He suddenly realizes how many years have passed since he last held Telemachus. The infant he left behind must now be learning to speak in full sentences, perhaps running through the palace gardens, perhaps asking Penelope endless questions about a father he barely remembers. Distance becomes sharper than any sword. The following day, while inspecting the camp's outer defences, Odysseus notices the old sailor sitting beside the shore once again mending fishing nets. "You always seem to find another tear," the sailor laughs. "The sea always finds another way to test them." He ties another careful knot, but every repair makes the net stronger. Odysseus watches the weathered hands moving patiently. Athena's lessons appear everywhere now. In dreams, in old men, in olive trees, in olive trees, in broken nets. Perhaps wisdom has surrounded him his entire life. He simply needed enough years to recognize it. As evening settles across the plain, cool wind moves gently through the Greek camp. Smoke rises from hundreds of cooking fires, while somewhere in the distance a shepherd's flute carries softly across the darkening fields. The music drifts even toward the walls of Troy, where another family may be listening to the same melody beneath the same stars. An owl lands upon the ridge overlooking both camps. It remains perfectly still, watching, waiting. Odysseus quietly inclines his head toward the bird, not as a king greeting a goddess, not even as a student greeting a teacher, but as one traveller recognizing another upon a very long road. Far ahead, unseen beyond the walls of Troy, events are already beginning to move that no amount of wisdom will completely prevent. Athena has spent years preparing her chosen mortal. Soon she will discover whether every quiet lesson, every dream, every omen, and every patient season has truly shaped a man capable of remaining wise when pride, anger, and fate threaten to consume the greatest heroes of Greece. By the 10th year of the war, the Greek camp has become almost unrecognizable from the collection of temporary shelters that first appeared upon the Trojan shore. Weathered wooden walls now surround large sections of the encampment. Streets have formed naturally between rows of tents. Workshops ring with the sound of hammers from sunrise until dusk. Children have never lived here. Yet the routines of ordinary life continue with remarkable persistence. Men bake bread, repair sandals, wash clothing in nearby streams, and argue over trivial matters that would have seemed impossible during the anxious first days after landing. You begin to understand another truth about long wars. Life refuses to disappear completely. It simply grows around suffering. Odysseus walks through the camp before dawn as he has done for many years. Familiar faces greet him warmly. Young soldiers who once arrived as inexperienced boys now command companies of their own. Some carry fresh scars across their arms or faces. Others limp from wounds that never fully healed. Every mark tells a story that no poet will have time to sing. Athena has taught him to notice these stories, not because they change history, because they change people. Yet beneath the calm routine, another feeling has begun spreading quietly through the Greek army. Frustration. 10 years have passed. Troy still stands. Every season that ends without victory strengthens old resentments. Small disagreements become larger. Harsh words linger longer than they once did. Even successful expeditions no longer bring the excitement they once inspired. Patience, greatest ally of wisdom, becomes increasingly difficult to preserve. One afternoon, disturbing news moves quickly through the camp. Agamemnon has taken Chryseis, daughter of a priest devoted to Apollo. The elderly priest comes humbly before the Greek leaders, carrying sacred garlands and rich gifts for his daughter's return. He speaks respectfully. He offers ransom. He reminds the assembled kings that even conquerors remain subject to the gods. Many commanders feel sympathy. Agamemnon does not. He refuses, harshly. The old priest departs in silence. His footsteps leave no mark upon history. His prayer soon will. Ancient storytellers describe how Apollo hears the priest's plea almost immediately. Whether listeners understood the following plague as literal divine punishment or symbolic reflection of disease spreading naturally through crowded military camps remains debated among historians. Both interpretations carry the same lesson. Pride often invites consequences that strength alone cannot prevent. Within days, sickness begins appearing throughout the Greek camp. At first, only a few men fall ill, then dozens. Soon funeral fires burn almost constantly. The smell of smoke changes. No longer cooking funeral pyres. Silence replaces laughter. Even the strongest warriors lower their voices. Odysseus walks through the camp, watching physicians struggle against an invisible enemy more terrifying than Trojan spears. Fever shows no respect for courage. Kings and servants breathe the same poisoned air. One exhausted healer quietly says, "You cannot outfight a sickness." Odysseus answers, "No, but perhaps we can outlearn it." Again, Athena's lesson emerges. Observe, understand, then act. Achilles finally demands that the assembled kings meet together. The entire army gathers beneath the open sky. Calchas reluctantly reveals the cause. Apollo's anger. The priest must be honoured. The daughter returned. The plague will continue otherwise. Agamemnon's face darkens. Instead of accepting responsibility, he directs his anger elsewhere. "If I surrender my prize," he declares, "another reward must replace it." The gathering grows uneasy. Everyone senses danger approaching. Achilles rises. "You place your own honour above the army." Agamemnon steps forward. "And you forget who commands it." The words strike harder than bronze. Odysseus watches both men carefully. Neither truly hears the other anymore. Pride has already closed their ears. He steps between them before voices become weapons. "My friends." Neither answers. He continues calmly. "We came here for one purpose." Achilles does not look away from Agamemnon. "So did I," Agamemnon replies. "Then remember your place." The fragile balance breaks. History remembers the argument that follows as one of the defining moments of the entire Trojan War. Harsh accusations fill the air. Old resentments emerge after years of silence. Finally, Agamemnon announces that he will take Briseis from Achilles in compensation for surrendering Chryseis. The decision changes everything. Achilles' expression becomes frighteningly calm. Sometimes silence reveals anger more clearly than shouting ever could. Odysseus understands this immediately. He remembers another lesson. The most dangerous storm often arrives after the wind suddenly disappears. That evening, Athena herself is said to intervene. According to Homer, she alone appears before Achilles, invisible to everyone else, preventing him from drawing his sword against Agamemnon, whether understood literally or poetically. The scene beautifully reflects the eternal struggle between impulse and reason. Odysseus never sees the goddess. He only notices Achilles slowly lowering his hand. A battle that might have destroyed the Greek army ends before it begins. Wisdom has won, only barely. Later, as darkness settles across the camp, Odysseus walks alone beside the sea. The waves sound exactly as they did 10 years earlier. Nothing about the sea has changed. Everything about the men has. He kneels, allowing cool water to wash across his hands. Behind him, footsteps approach. It is Nestor. The young grow impatient. "The old grow tired," Odysseus answers. Nestor smiles gently. "Perhaps, but wisdom belongs to neither youth nor age. It belongs to whoever listens." They remain together watching the moonlit water. Neither speaks for several minutes. Finally, Nestor quietly asks, "What worries you most?" Odysseus looks toward the distant fires of Troy. "That we may defeat ourselves before defeating the city." The old king nods. "I have feared the same." Far away, an owl calls once from the darkness beyond the camp. Both men hear it. Neither comments. Some signs require no explanation. That night, Odysseus dreams again. He stands before two enormous olive trees growing side by side. Their branches are intertwined. Their roots share the same earth. Suddenly one tree begins pulling away from the other. The roots strain. The ground cracks. Both trees begin weakening. Athena appears silently between them. She places one hand upon each trunk. "Strength divided," she says softly, "feeds only the storm." Then she disappears. Odysseus awakens before dawn. The meaning feels painfully clear. The greatest danger facing Greece no longer stands behind Troy's mighty walls. It walks freely among the Greek tents. Pride. Before sunrise, messengers quietly carry out Agamemnon's order. Briseis is taken from Achilles. The great warrior withdraws from battle. Thousands watch in Anihio. In uneasy silence, no cheers follow. No celebration. Only the unsettling feeling that something precious has just been broken. Odysseus watches Achilles disappear into his tent without another word. He understands that cities are not destroyed in a single day. Neither are armies. They first begin cracking quietly from within, and somewhere beyond mortal sight. Athena continues watching her chosen student, knowing that the lessons she has spent a lifetime teaching will now face their greatest trial. For wisdom is never more difficult to preserve than when surrounded by wounded pride. The morning after Achilles withdraws from the war arrives with an uneasy stillness. The Greek camp awakens as it always has. Fires are lit, bread is baked, armour is fastened, orders pass from captain to captain. Yet beneath every familiar sound lies a quiet awareness that something fundamental has changed. One of Greece's greatest warriors now refuses to fight, and every soldier understands that the balance of the war has shifted before a single spear has been thrown. You walk beside Odysseus through the awakening camp. Faces that once greeted him with confidence now search his expression for reassurance. No one asks the question aloud. Can Greece still win? Odysseus cannot answer. Not honestly. Instead, he speaks with the cooks preparing morning meals, the physicians tending those still recovering from Apollo's plague, and the sentries returning from another long night along the defensive earthworks. Wisdom, Athena has always taught, begins by understanding the condition of ordinary people before making decisions for kings. Near the shoreline, Diomedes joins him. "I visited Achilles." Odysseus looks toward him. "And he would not receive me." Neither man appears surprised. The younger king watches the waves for several moments before speaking again. "I have seen men wounded by arrows." He pauses. "But never by honour." Odysseus nods slowly. Those wounds often last longer. The sea breeze carries away the conversation. Some injuries cannot be bound with linen. Throughout the day, Trojan scouts become noticeably bolder. Patrols ride farther from the city walls. Small groups of archers begin harassing Greek work parties repairing defences near the edge of the plain. Hector has noticed the growing uncertainty within the enemy camp. A wise commander always recognises opportunity. Odysseus cannot help admiring the speed with which the Trojan prince understands the changing battlefield. Late that afternoon, another council gathers inside Agamemnon's command tent. The atmosphere feels heavier than before. Maps still cover the great table. Supply reports still arrive. Scouts continue describing enemy movements. Everything appears unchanged. Only Achilles is missing. His empty place seems larger than any throne. Agamemnon speaks confidently. The army remains strong. Few disagree openly. Even fewer appear convinced. Nestor quietly recommends caution until morale improves. Ajax argues that hesitation will only encourage Hector. Diomedes proposes limited raids designed to test Trojan responses without risking a full engagement. Finally, Agamemnon turns toward Odysseus. What does Ithaca advise? Odysseus studies the faces surrounding him before answering. The army needs hope. Agamemnon frowns. It needs victory. The first often comes before the second. Silence settles across the tent. Athena's lessons echo once again. People rarely fight well because they are ordered, it needs. They fight well because they believe. Ancient historians frequently observe that morale influenced campaigns as profoundly as weapons or numbers. While Homer explains events through divine favour and heroic destiny, later military writers often emphasized leadership, discipline, and confidence. Together, these traditions reveal two ways of describing the same reality. Armies weakened in spirit become vulnerable long before they are defeated in battle. The council ends without complete agreement. As evening approaches, Hector leads a carefully organised advance across the plain. Trojan shields flash beneath the lowering sun while disciplined ranks move steadily forward, testing the Greek defences without committing fully to battle. Odysseus watches from a low rise overlooking the field. There, he points toward Hector. He presses. Diomedes follows his gaze, but not too far. Exactly, hey. Both men recognise the same quality: patience. Hector has learned that victory belongs not merely to courage, but to timing. Athena would have respected such restraint, even in an enemy. The following morning, the Trojans attack more boldly. Bronze crashes against bronze. Spears arc through bright morning air. Dust rises beneath thousands of running feet until much of the battlefield disappears beneath a golden haze. Commands echo across the plain while wounded horses scream somewhere beyond the smoke. Odysseus moves constantly, never remaining in one place for long. He reinforces weakening positions, carries messages between commanders, directs reserves where pressure grows greatest. He fights when necessary, yet spends far more time preventing confusion than seeking personal glory. A young soldier, bleeding from a cut across his forehead, stares at him in amazement. "My king, you are everywhere." Odysseus smiles despite the chaos. "No, I simply keep moving." Wisdom often travels faster than strength. By midday, the Greeks hold their ground, but only barely. Without Achilles, every success costs more effort. Every advance demands greater sacrifice. Every mistake becomes more dangerous. As the battle gradually fades toward evening, Hector withdraws his forces in perfect order. He has achieved exactly what he intended. The Greeks remain standing, but they are tired, very tired. That night, countless cooking fires burn quietly throughout the camp. Few songs are heard. Men eat in thoughtful silence. Many glance occasionally toward the distant tent of Achilles. Its entrance remains closed. The greatest warrior in Greece sits apart from the war. Odysseus walks alone beyond the outer defences after darkness fully settles across the plain. The air has cooled. Crickets sing among the dry grasses. Above him the stars shine with indifferent brilliance, exactly as they did before the first Greek ship ever sailed from Aulis. He removes the small wooden owl from beneath his cloak. Years of handling have polished its surface until it almost seems alive. "I understand now," he whispers. "You never chose the strongest." The breeze stirs gently. "You chose the one who would keep thinking when strength failed." At that moment, an owl glides silently overhead before settling upon a weathered olive tree, growing alone between the Greek camp and the distant walls of Troy. The bird faces neither army. It simply watches both. Another sign. Another quiet reminder. Athena belongs to wisdom itself, not to pride. Before dawn, a final dream comes. Odysseus stands once more beneath the great olive tree, at the centre of Athena's endless temple. This time the tree bears countless ripe olives, yet many lie scattered upon the ground, crushed beneath careless feet. Athena kneels silently, gathering each one with extraordinary patience. She places even the damaged fruit into a woven basket. Finally she looks toward him. A wise gardener saves what can still grow. When he awakens, the eastern horizon has only begun to brighten. The meaning settles gently within him. The war will not be won by defeating Troy alone. First, someone must save Greece from itself. He rises before the camp has fully awakened and turns toward the distant tent where Achilles remains alone. Sensing that the greatest challenge Athena has prepared him for is no longer a battlefield, a prophecy, or even the walls of Troy, it's the far more difficult task of healing hearts divided by pride before the fate of every Greek hangs upon their unity. Before the sun has fully risen, a thin veil of mist drifts across the plain between the Greek camp and the towering walls of Troy. Dew clings to the grasses surrounding the defensive trenches, and the sea lies unusually calm, reflecting the pale colours of the awakening skull. From a distance, the thousands of tents appear peaceful, almost like an ordinary village beginning another quiet morning. Yet beneath that calm rests a truth every soldier now feels. The army is weakening, not because its walls have fallen, nor because its supplies have failed, but because its spirit has begun to fracture. You walk beside Odysseus through the silent camp. The usual greeting sounds subdued. Men who once discussed strategy now whisper about Achilles. Others speak of Hector's growing confidence. Each rumour travels farther than any spear. Athena has taught that ideas often move more quickly than armies. By midday, another fierce clash erupts along the plain. Hector presses hard against the Greek line, driving his warriors forward with remarkable discipline. Shields lock together, spears flash beneath the afternoon sun. Dust rises until much of the battlefield disappears beneath a golden haze. Though Ajax and Diomedes hold their positions with extraordinary courage, the Trojans advance farther than ever before. For the first time, the distant Greek ships no longer seem impossibly safe. That realization unsettles everyone. As evening finally brings an uneasy pause to the fighting, Agamemnon gathers the assembled kings. His confidence has changed. The pride that once hardened every word has begun giving way to exhaustion. "I was wrong," he says quietly. Few expected to hear those words. "I dishonoured Achilles." Silence fills the command tent. No one celebrates the confession. Truth spoken too late often carries sorrow instead of relief. Nestor slowly inclines his head. Then wisdom still remains possible. The old king recommends sending an embassy. Not soldiers, not commands. Friends. Men whom Achilles respects. Agamemnon agrees. Rich gifts are prepared. Gold, fine horses, beautiful bronze vessels, 7 skilled craftsmen. Promises of honour restored after Troy falls. Every treasure a king believes might repair what pride has broken. Yet Odysseus understands something deeper. No gift can replace wounded trust. Still, the journey must be made. As darkness settles across the camp, 3 men begin walking toward Achilles' distant shelter. Odysseus, Ajax, Phoenix, the aging teacher who helped raise Achilles from childhood. The path feels strangely quiet. Cooking fires burn behind them while the stars slowly emerge overhead. Somewhere beyond the camp an owl calls once before silence returns. Odysseus notices it immediately. Another reminder. Athena still watches. Achilles' tent stands apart from the rest of the army near the black ships of the Myrmidons. Lamps glow warmly inside while the sound of a lyre drifts gently through the night. The music surprises Odysseus. Achilles is not sharpening weapons. He is singing. For a few moments the visitors remain outside listening. The melody speaks not of battle, but of distant rivers, mountain valleys, and forgotten homes. Even the greatest warrior sometimes longs for places untouched by war. When they enter, Achilles welcomes them with genuine courtesy. His anger has not erased hospitality. Food is placed before the guests. Wine is poured. Only after the meal does conversation turn toward the reason for their visit. Phoenix speaks first. His voice carries the tenderness of an old father. "My son," Achilles lowers his eye. "I have never stopped being grateful to you." Then listen. The old man reminds him of childhood lessons, of honour balanced by mercy, of greatness measured not only by victory but by compassion. Achilles listens respectfully, yet his expression does not change. Ajax speaks next. His words are simple. The army needs you. Again, Achilles remains silent. Finally, every eye turns toward Odysseus. He does not immediately mention Agamemnon, nor gifts, nor glory. Instead, he asks one quiet question. When this war is remembered centuries from now, how do you wish your heart to be remembered? Achilles studies him carefully. My heart, yes, everyone already knows your strength. They will speak of your courage. They will remember your victories. Odysseus pauses. But what will they say about the man beneath the armour? The question lingers in the still air. Athena often taught through questions rather than commands. Achilles rises and walks toward the entrance of the tent. Outside, the night stretches peacefully across the camp. The gods gave me two possible destinies, he says softly. If I return home, I live long but am forgotten. If I remain here, I earn everlasting glory but die young. He looks toward the distant walls of Troy. I chose glory. His voice grows quieter. But no one warned me that glory could become lonely. Odysseus feels unexpected sorrow. For the first time, he sees not the greatest warrior of Greece, but a young man carrying a burden no mortal should have to bear. Ancient audiences often remembered this embassy because it revealed Achilles at his most human. Modern scholars frequently note that Homer's greatest heroes become unforgettable not through perfection, but through vulnerability. Their doubts make their courage believable. Agamemnon's gifts are presented. Golden tripods, talented servants, magnificent horses, promises of reconciliation. Achilles thanks the ambassadors sincerely, then gently refuses. My quarrel is not with gold. He looks directly at Odysseus. It is with trust. No argument follows. Odysseus understands. Some wounds require time rather than persuasion. As the visitors prepare to leave, Phoenix chooses to remain with Achilles through the night. Ajax departs in disappointed silence. Odysseus pauses once more at the entrance. I hope we speak again soon. Achilles nods. So do I. Neither realizes how little time remains before destiny changes everything. The walk back through the sleeping camp feels longer than before. A cool wind moves across the plain, carrying the scent of olive wood smoke and distant seawater. Above them, the stars remain brilliantly clear. Halfway to Agamemnon's tent, Odysseus notices an owl perched upon one of the defensive posts overlooking the camp. It does not fly away. It simply watches. He quietly inclines his head, not because the embassy succeeded. It did not. But because wisdom sometimes lies in making the right attempt even when failure seems likely. That night another dream visits him. He sees Athena standing beside an immense olive tree whose branches have been broken by a violent storm. She does not mourn the shattered limbs. Instead, she carefully binds one cracked branch with woven cloth. It may still live, she says. Odysseus awakens before dawn. Outside, the eastern sky has only begun to brighten. Somewhere beyond the quiet camp, Hector is already preparing another assault. Somewhere inside his lonely tent, Achilles still wrestles with pride, grief and destiny. And somewhere above both armies, unseen by every mortal eye, Athena continues waiting, knowing that the moment she has foreseen since Odysseus was a child is drawing steadily closer. When wisdom alone may determine whether hope survives the darkest days of the Trojan War. Dawn breaks beneath a sky the colour of polished silver. Cool mist hangs above the plain, separating the Greek camp from the mighty walls of Troy, softening the sharp outlines of towers that have watched 10 long years of struggle. The sea beyond the anchored ships remains calm, almost impossibly calm, as though nature itself pauses before another turning point in the story. Gulls drift effortlessly across the morning air. Somewhere among the distant olive groves, an owl calls once before silence returns. You stand beside Odysseus as another day begins. He no longer resembles the king who first sailed from Ithaca. The scar upon his leg remains. The rooted olive bed waits far away beside Penelope. The memory of Telemachus has grown from that of an infant into the image of a young man he barely knows. The little wooden owl given to him years earlier has become smooth from countless journeys inside his cloak. Every lesson, every sorrow, every patient season has shaped him. Athena did not choose him because he never failed. She chose him because every failure taught him something lasting. Throughout the camp, soldiers prepare once again for battle. Armour is repaired, spears are counted, horses are watered before sunrise. Yet the atmosphere has changed. The embassy to Achilles failed. Hector grows stronger. The future feels uncertain. Strangely, Odysseus does not appear discouraged. Years ago, he believed wisdom meant finding the perfect answer. Now he understands something different. Wisdom often means continuing to seek the next right step even after discovering there are no perfect answers. Nestor joins him beside the shoreline. "We are old men now," Odysseus smiles. "Older?" The elder king laughs softly. "I have watched many rulers." He studies the quiet sea. "Most wish to be remembered." "You never did." Odysseus considers the thought. "I wish to return home." Nestor nods. "And perhaps that is why the goddess favoured you." The words linger. Not because they flatter, because they reveal something quietly true. Many heroes chased immortality through glory. Odysseus pursued home. Athena, goddess of civilization, wisdom, craft, and ordered life, understood that preserving a home often required greater wisdom than conquering a city. Ancient writers described Athena as the protector of cities rather than their destroyer. She represented careful planning, skilled craftsmanship, justice, and disciplined thought. Modern scholars often note that Odysseus embodied these same qualities more consistently than any other Greek hero, while Achilles represented unmatched martial excellence. Odysseus demonstrated the intelligence necessary to preserve communities after battles ended. Together they reflected two complementary ideals of Greek heroism. As the morning passes, Odysseus walks once more through the camp. He stops beside the blacksmith whose forge has burned for nearly a decade. The craftsman smiles. "My hammer grows lighter every year." "No," Odysseus replies. "You have simply grown stronger." Farther along he greets physicians preparing fresh bandages. He thanks sailors maintaining ships that have waited faithfully through countless seasons. He pauses beside young soldiers who were children when the war first began. Each conversation lasts only moments, yet every person leaves smiling. Leadership, he realizes, has very little to do with standing above others. It has everything to do with walking among them. By afternoon he climbs the familiar ridge overlooking both armies. The same ridge where he has stood through changing seasons, victories, disappointments, prophecies, and dreams. Below him lie two worlds, the Greek camp, the city of Troy. For years he imagined them as opposites. Now he sees something else. Both are filled with fathers hoping to see children again, mothers waiting for footsteps that may never return, young people dreaming about futures larger than war. Athena has taught him the rarest lesson of all, to recognize humanity without surrendering courage. A cool wind stirs the branches of a nearby olive tree. An owl glides silently toward it before settling among the leaves. The bird neither cries nor moves. It simply watches, just as it always has. Odysseus smiles. "You have followed me a long way." Whether he speaks to the owl, to Athena, or to wisdom itself, even he cannot entirely say. That evening another dream comes. Not inside the endless temple, not beneath towering marble columns. He dreams of Ithaca. Sunlight filters through the familiar olive branches. Penelope stands beside the rooted bed they built together years before. Telemachus, now grown, works quietly outside beneath the shade of the ancient tree. Nothing extraordinary happens. No prophecy, no god, no miracle, only home. Then Athena appears beside the olive tree. She looks exactly as she did before. Simple armour, calm eyes, no crown. This time she speaks more than a single sentence. You once believed wisdom was cleverness. The dream remains wonderfully still. It is not. You believed wisdom was victory. It is not. You believed wisdom meant always knowing what to do. It does not. She gently places one hand upon the trunk of the olive tree. Wisdom is remembering what must never be lost. The tree's roots spread beneath the earth farther than sight can follow. That is why I chose you. You never stopped longing for home. You never stopped asking questions. You never stopped learning. She smiles almost imperceptibly. And because even when surrounded by war, you continued seeing people before enemies. The dreamer. Dream slowly fades. Odysseus awakens just before sunrise. Peace fills him. Not certainty. Not triumph. Peace. The years ahead will still contain unbearable grief. Great heroes will fall. Troy itself has not yet met its famous destiny. The wooden horse has not yet been imagined. The long voyage home still waits beyond countless hardships. Yet the question that has accompanied your journey from the beginning has finally found its answer. Athena did not choose Odysseus because he was the strongest. She did not choose him because he was flawless. She did not even choose him because he was the cleverest man alive. She chose him because wisdom is more than intelligence. It's patience when anger feels easier, humility when pride offers temptation, compassion when hatred promises satisfaction, curiosity when certainty becomes dangerous, hope when every reason for hope seems gone. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the sea, the owl rises silently from the olive tree and disappears into the brightening sky. Odysseus watches until it's no longer visible. Then he turns back toward the waiting camp. Another day has begun. Another decision awaits. Another lesson remains to be learned. And as you quietly leave him there, standing between the sea that carried him from home and the city that has shaped his destiny, you understand that Athena's greatest gift was never victory, prophecy, or divine protection. Her greatest gift was teaching one ordinary mortal that wisdom is not a destination reached once and forever. It is a lifelong journey of choosing understanding over pride, patience over anger, and humanity over glory. Perhaps that is why the story of Odysseus continues to endure after thousands of years. Because somewhere, in every age, every culture, and every life, there comes a moment when strength alone is no longer enough. And in that quiet moment, the grey-eyed goddess still whispers the same timeless lesson. Think first, learn always, protect what truly matters,